Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Seconds to go. Panthers coming off the wall with it. It's Barkov. Best in the game in the middle. They go to shoot, block, rebound, they score! The Panthers find the rebound in the slot with 11.8 seconds to go. Sam Reinhart has given Florida a 3-2 lead.
That's what it sounded like last night right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN, as they once again lose. This one coming in the final 10 seconds of the game. Alex, the hockey gods are just not on the Blue side this year. It's just not their season. That was my biggest takeaway from last night. It's just not going to happen, man. We knew this was going to be the stretch that would define the season in one way or another. They got those 2 wins against Calgary. Looks like, okay, this could be a good stretch. And then they lose that game against Utah. That was a big one for them. But they end up getting the win in the shootout against Vegas. It's like, all right, maybe they can put something together here. And then instead, lose against Vegas, lose against Dallas, lose against Vancouver, lose against Colorado, win against Utah, lose against Edmonton, and should have had the 2 points in that one. And then last night, the big loss against the Florida Panthers. So you have lost now 6 of your last 7 games. You've lost 7 of your last 9 games. Bada boom, bada bing. That's the way that things go. You've won 1 game in regulation over your last 9. Alex, I think the decision at this point is very clear for Doug Armstrong. This is not a contender. This is a team that you should be selling from as we get closer and closer to the trade deadline. They're not even at 500 anymore. Now you're 2 games below 500. You got 1 game left for the break, and then you'll have about a week and a half prior to the trade deadline. It's time for him to send out his wish list once again over this break. Hey, GMs across the NHL, go ahead and take a look at this roster, put your best offers together, because we are looking for a sale at the trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, the dagger that took place was that loss to the Utah Hockey Club. Now, I don't think that basically wiped the Blues off and saying, like, it's over, but that was the dagger to where you win 2 versus Calgary and you drop that game and you're thinking, that? Really? This is how you're going to go down? And then from there, you pick up 1 victory all the way up until last night when you lost. And that 1 victory was, 2 victories. The Utah Hockey Club.
1 in regulation.
And then, the Vegas Golden Knights one that you won in a shootout, which in all reality, you should.
Regulation.
Well, you also should have lost that game because Jack Eichel missed an empty net in overtime. So, like, it's been about the most brutal stretch you can ask for, and I think this team knows. I thought the last 2 games they played better. But the problem was the first period against Edmonton, you came out flat. And then in the game against Florida, you were flat in the 3rd period. And those are the 2 periods that you really can't be your worst at when you got the Edmonton Oilers or a Florida Panthers team that's...
In the last 2 games, you've been outchanced in the first period by a final of 27-9. Outchanced 27-9. If you're looking at high danger chances, it's 9-2 last night in favor of the Panthers. If you're looking at the game before that, oh wow, look at that, 9-2. 18-4 high danger chances in favor of the opposition at 5-on-5 over your last 2 games. In the first period, dude. They're just not coming out ready to play.
Yeah, well, and they lack finishing. They lack the ability to, the ever-famous quote by Doug Armstrong, kill off the opponent. And last night was a perfect example of it. Zach Bolduc had an opportunity to make it a 2-goal game with a breakaway, and he missed the net. Dylan Holloway had the opportunity to make it a 2-goal game, and he tried to go 5-hole, and the goaltender beat him on that one. You're losing, and Curbs and I talked about this on postgame last night, you're losing 2 different ways. One, your inability to finish as goal scorers, whether it's your best guys like a Pavel Buchnevich and a Robert Thomas missing an empty net, or a Zach Bolduc and a Dylan Holloway young guys missing scoring opportunities. But you're also missing the opportunity to close out and finish games with the Leon Draisaitl late goal, the Vegas Golden Knights scoring 2 goals late on you to get it to overtime where you still won. This team's lacking the ability to kill off the opponent. And some of this is youth. Bolduc, he's a young player. He'll figure out how to finish that one. Some of this is a little concern with your top players, being Thomas, Buchnevich. Last night, to me, was a perfect example. It was best on best, and they bested you. Because it was Thomas, Kyrou, Buchnevich on the ice against Tkachuk, Reinhart, and Barkov. And go back and watch how that play developed. Florida has the puck behind the net. They win the puck battle. They go past Robert Thomas, and then they make a cross-ice pass through two Blues players, Buchnevich and Kyrou, onto the stick of Sam Reinhart, who took the two shots. And that is just an unfortunate bounce, where it bounces off of Cam Fowler's skate right onto the stick of Sam Reinhart for a second chance.
And then a great deflection as well, which redirected the shot into the net.
But
Could
that
have
play,
been saved potentially by Hofer, who had a great game last night.
But that play should have never happened because you couldn't win a puck battle along the boards, and that was best on best, and their best got you.
Yeah, somebody on the text line said, BK, I think the reality of this is we need to stop saying they're not good, coming out ready to play. They just aren't good enough. The other teams are better, especially the ones that we're playing against right now. I think there's some truth to that, because as Alex is mentioning, it's not just the beginning of these games. It's also like sometimes they're getting well outplayed in the first period, but they survive somehow, whether that's good goaltending or just good puck luck, whatever it might be, and they're still not finding a way to finish these games off. But I do think there's something to this stuff in the first period, man. Like in their last 5 losses, in the first period, again, this is just at 5-on-5. This is not including any of the power play opportunities for the opposition. They have been outchanced 64-25. Almost triple the number of opportunities for the opponents that the Blues have had. Again, outchanced 64-25 in a 5-game stretch in the first period of 5-on-5. High danger chances are in favor of the opposition in those 5 losses, 27-8. 27-8, and that's the high danger chances that we talked about. That is the number one thing that Jim Montgomery is going to want to improve among all of the things that he can change with the St. Louis Blues. Get more of them and prevent them from the opposition. It's the opposite that's happening right now, specifically in the first period. That's happening last night against Florida, and then Edmonton, Colorado, Vancouver, and Dallas. 5 real contenders in the Western Conference. But it's not just one of them. It's 5 of them that we're seeing this against, and I guess Florida in the East as well. We're seeing the gap between where the Blues are at and where true contenders are. Dude, it is really wide right now. And I know some of that is because they've got some young players. Some of that is also because their best players, to your point, Alex, are not matching up against the best players in the West.
Yeah, which is different from last year, and why there was at least some optimism down the stretch when Drew Bannister took over, because your best players were playing with the other best players. Robert Thomas was eliminating the other team's top line and was still a point-per-game player. Colton Parayko was playing, we thought, his best hockey until we've seen what he's done this season. And your goaltenders, Jordan Binnington was a Vezina Trophy, or should have been a Vezina Trophy finalist. This year, every single time, I believe they've won 3 games against the Central Division. I think they're the worst team against the Central Division this year. And then look at the Central Division teams. Winnipeg, their stars always kill you, whether it's Mark Scheifele or Kyle Connor. Dallas, it's Jamie Benn, it's Rope Hintz, it's Tyler Seguin, Miro Heiskanen. Minnesota, it's always Kirill Kaprizov. Edmonton, McDavid Draisaitl. Vegas, Mark Stone. Like, their stars come out to play every single night. And the one thing that the Blues are still trying to figure out, and I think this goes back to Doug Armstrong's comment about how we evaluate players, because I think they thought they had a top-line center and a top-line winger, but when you go up against these guys, they kind of make you look like a second-line center. And there's been times this season that I could argue Schenn, Holloway, and Kyrou have been your top line over Thomas Buchnevich and Neighbors. So I just think right now you're not getting, and I don't know if it's because these guys are snake bitten, they've lost confidence. I definitely don't think they've just lost their talent and last year was a fluke. I think what they've got right now is the inability to have star players on the ice. And until you figure that out, until you have difference makers that shift to shift can make something happen, you're going to end up like these games.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brayden Kiley. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center. You guys can get involved in the show. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to do so. We'll get to ask us anything at the end of this hour. You can always check us out on YouTube as well at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. We continue our conversation on the St. Louis Blues because coming up next, we got to talk about the captain. Wasn't a bad game for him last night, but it sure sounds like there is real interest in him on the trade market. We'll talk about that, let you hear from one of the biggest insiders in the business on this coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios. This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Well, some believe that there's potential of Brayden Schenn being traded by the St. Louis Blues. He is their captain. He does have a full no-trade clause, so it is a complicated process. But we also know Doug Armstrong, the general manager, very well, how aggressive he can be. And the Blues are underachieving right now. So, yes, the top contenders looking at the market, looking for a center, are interested, and that would include the Toronto Maple Leafs. The return would have to be mammoth. Is there a team that is willing to pay it? It's too soon to say, but I do believe the Blues are at least testing or gauging the market to see what that level of interest is, and ultimately will probably have to make that call in the weeks ahead.
Full disclosure, Alex Ferrario almost took my head off earlier today as we started talking about this. So fingers crossed it doesn't come to that here on BK and Ferrario. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We got Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us today as we're broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out of the Centene Community Ice Center. I got a little Tony. I had a little bit too much pushback. I need to apologize for that.
I will say this. I thought Ferrario had some tone, too. Like, you guys are like two peas in a pot ready to go at it. I'm just here to...
You fight tone with tone. That's what I always said.
I'm just going to be over here just stirring the pot while you two go at it.
So that voice you heard on the return was Darren Drager, one of the best insiders in the business. And he's not the only one saying this. We've seen some buzz coming from elsewhere. We saw it on a radio show up in Toronto the other day as well with Justin Bourne up there. And they were talking about, hey, what do the Toronto Maple Leafs do? They need a second or third line center, preferably a second line center if possible. And they brought up Brayden Schenn's name. So this is something that's being bandied about up in Toronto. And then earlier today on the 32 Thoughts podcast, it was Elliot Friedman, who also mentioned, hey, that the Maple Leafs are looking at centers. He said they've got a ton of players on their list, and there was literally one name that he brought up specifically, and it was Brayden Schenn. Now, today, over on The Athletic, they have Brayden Schenn for the first time so far this year on their trade board. Now, that does not mean that he will be traded. None of this means that Brayden Schenn is going to be moved by the trade deadline this year. We saw a lot of this last year with Pavel Buchnevich. And guess what? He not only stayed, he signed a long-term extension in the offseason. So all of that is worth noting. But that's the backdrop, Alex, to why we are even having this conversation, because I know it's going to frustrate some fans that we are even bringing up the possibility of Brayden Schenn being moved, which I get. He's probably the favorite player for many of you. But he's 33 years old. He has 3 years left on his deal at $6.5 million per year, and he's having a good season. This might be your only real chance, not only to trade Brayden Schenn, but to trade Brayden Schenn for some kind of a real return to a team that has somewhat of a desperate need and is almost as all in as you can get to win a cup this season. So for all of those different things, it's kind of a best-case scenario if you're Doug Armstrong.
Right.
Alex, let's start here. Do you think this is real? Like, do you think there should be and will be real conversations about the possibility of the Blues trading Brayden Schenn this year at the deadline?
Yeah, I think it's real. And I think some of it is because of the return that you could get for Brayden Schenn, which we'll get to. But I think the other part of this is Doug Armstrong looking at his team saying, this is the third year we're going to underperform. Changes need to be taking place. And when you go back to that press conference he had last week, he talked about the leadership and how it was concerning that the same message was coming out. Does this mean that Brayden Schenn is the problem and why the team is struggling? No, I don't believe that at all. I think Brayden Schenn's a great captain. But I think when struggles continue, you have to make changes. And if you're Doug Armstrong, you look at the state of your team and you say, when we believe we're going to compete, whether you believe that's next year, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, is Brayden Schenn a part of it? And I think a lot of people would respond with, probably not. He's going to be 34 next year, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. By the end of this contract, he's going to be 36 years old. And the style that Brayden Schenn plays sometimes isn't sustainable. So if the Blues are looking at this, they're saying, hey, if we can find a way to get out of some of this contract, because you're not getting rid of all of it. You're going to have to eat some of this contract if you're trading Brayden Schenn. That's just going to be the nature of this beast right now, because teams can't take on $6.5 million now. Next year they can, but now they can't. And once you eat salary, you're eating it for the remainder of that contract. But if he's not into your plans and he could help somebody else, it gives you the window to reassemble your roster. And the way I'm looking at this is if you're able to move a Brayden Schenn out and get something back in return that helps you to next year, and then it opens up cap space for you in the offseason to go out and sign a Trent Frederick. Go out and bring in somebody who's 25, 26 years old who can play that middle six center or wing role that Brayden Schenn was. I think this is just a lot of the Blues have continued to struggle. The problem has not been fixed. Not saying that Brayden Schenn is the sole problem with this roster, but if there's interest in him, we start making vast changes with this team and we put a different face in front of our roster.
T-Bone, where do you stand on this? Like the possibility of the Blues trading him, the likelihood of him commanding any kind of a real return. Like, where do you stand on what the Blues can or should do with Brayden Schenn?
So I think if the Blues can find a trade partner, and if it is Toronto, I think it makes all the sense in the world to move on from Brayden Schenn. And it's not because I don't like the player. It's just because I can look at the way that he's getting older. He plays the center position, and as we've seen, when you play that style, Alex mentioned it. I mean, these guys, it can just go like that. Snap of the finger can be gone.
David Backes is a perfect example.
Exactly. And I thought Schenn had kind of already lost it coming into this year, if we're being completely honest. Coming into the year, I thought, man, Schenn is on a bad contract. And right now he's playing really good hockey. Now, he's not the guy who was in his prime, no doubt about it. But if somebody has interest in that and is desperate enough, or does just look at him as an answer to what they are looking for on their roster, it makes sense for the Blues to make this move because I don't think it's going to get any better from here. And it's the chance to get out from that contract, and it's the opportunity cost for the next couple of years with that $6.5 million on that cap hit. Now, will you get anything of significance on him? That's where I'm kind of skeptical because it is a big contract. These are contracts that are hard to move at the trade deadline, especially at $6.5 million. And though the cap is going up, you do got to contend with it for this year. I'm skeptical that they're going to get much unless they do eat significant amount of that money. But even then, like Dreger in that cut said, like a mammoth return. I don't know that the Blues are getting that.
I think the return for the Blues is the cap space.
Yeah.
This, to me, I remember talking about Vladimir Tarasenko in the offseason when it was a question, do the Blues trade him? Do they keep him? What is the plan here? They ended up keeping him, but at the time I was like, hey, man, $6.5 million in cap space. That's the return. Forget whatever draft pick you get. The benefit to trading Vladdy at the time was it allows you flexibility for that season. And they ended up not dealing him, and they did end up getting a first-round pick for him and another player in that deal. But I think it was Mikkola, if I'm not mistaken. But the value was the space. I don't know what you get back in return for Schenn because I don't know what kind of a deal they're going to be making here. If they're taking on $3+ million of salary, which they can do if they wanted to, I mean, that's typically a second-round value. Retaining that kind of salary alone is we get a second-round pick to retain. If you were a third party, like if the Blues and the Maple Leafs made this deal and they included, I don't know, Buffalo, whatever random team that you wanted to include in this discussion, Chicago, and the Blackhawks said, hey, we'll retain $3 million. We'll be the 50% retaining. We'll be like a clearinghouse for both teams. They would probably get from the Maple Leafs a second-round pick to retain that salary. So if the Blues decide to do that on their own, that's the starting point for any kind of a deal here. And for 3 years of that salary, it might be a first-round pick literally just to retain salary on the deal. That's where I think this kind of a deal is incredibly difficult to pull off from both sides. And it becomes truly man, how desperate is Toronto? Like, they're willing to go that far. And, Alex, the thing that got us both, like, kind of up in arms on different sides of things before the show today was...
You did say second-round pick value, Alex. Who's that?
He also said almost a first-round pick value.
No, not almost. Definitely a first-round pick. If 3 years of $3 million retaining, that's a first-round pick.
Yeah.
I know.
If that's the value that you're putting on the salary... You're the worst.
Come on.
You brought up the name Matthew Nyes.
Yeah.
Which, to me, is absurd. The idea of trading a Matthew Nyes, who's in that same prospects category of, like, Jimmy Snuggerud, but has proven it at the NHL level. So, in my opinion, I think he's a better asset right now than Jimmy Snuggerud. And I don't say that as any disrespect to Snuggerud. He just hasn't scored, 20 goals in 50 games at the NHL level thus far.
Give it time.
Maybe. That'd be great. I'd be totally into Jimmy Snuggerud doing the exact same thing next year that Nyes has done this year. But if that is something that is real... Like, if that is an actual possibility, it would be one of the biggest heists that we've seen at the NHL's trade deadline in recent memory. And I say that as somebody that loves Brayden Schenn's game. I think he is one of the most enjoyable guys on this team to talk to. I think he's great for the culture. Like, everything about Brayden Schenn as a player is what the Blues should aspire to be. And if they can get Matthew Nyes in return for him at the deadline, they should drive Brayden Schenn to the airport and fly him first class to Toronto on their dime. Because that's absurd. That's an absolutely asinine ask. And yet, Alex, you think that's real?
I do. And this, I mean, we were just spitballing last night at the game because obviously this Dreger thing came out. And I don't think it's as absurd as you're making it out to be. And mostly because what you said a little bit ago, this isn't Matthew Nyes versus Brayden Schenn. This is Matthew Nyes versus Mitch Marner. Now, they have more cap space. They can make it work. But the reason Toronto would even entertain this is because you need a Stanley Cup. You need a Stanley Cup. And my assumption as to why this is even being brought up, connection between Toronto and St. Louis with the Brayden Schenn, is because Craig Berube is like, that guy can help us get to the next level. And what you have to do to go get something, and I know Brayden Schenn is not this world beater, but in the eyes of the Toronto Maple Leafs, he's something they don't have. He's a middle six winger / centerman who provides grit and playoff experience. Their next best thing to that is Max Domi. Would you rather have Max Domi or Brayden Schenn?
Yeah, I mean...
And that's where it gets to. Do I think that Toronto's easily going to be like, yeah, Matthew Nyes easy? No, absolutely not. You probably have to sweeten this pot, and I don't know what else goes into this. But there's two teams that are two past trades in the history that I can just think back to. The Dallas Stars, when they wanted to win a Stanley Cup, they needed to set themselves over the top. They traded for Joe Nieuwendyk, who was 31 years old at the time. They traded Jerome McGinley, who had played. I don't think he played in the National Hockey League at that time, but he was an 11th overall pick, and he was a highly touted prospect. He was traded to Calgary Flames, goes on to be a Hockey Hall of Famer. How'd that go? Well, Dallas won a Stanley Cup, though. Dallas won a Stanley Cup, and I think they got to a Stanley Cup final 2 other times.
I think Jerome McGinley would have gotten him more.
The Calgary Flames traded Brett Hall, who had scored 26 goals in this first year with Calgary, to the Blues for Rick Wamsley and Rob Ramage. Why? Because they said, we need to get to the Stanley Cup. And they won the Stanley Cup the next year.
But they could have had Brett Hall.
I understand that. But
I understand.
I just heard that we're getting a Hall of Famer.
No, here's what I'm saying is, I'm not saying Matthew Nyes is either of these guys. But those teams said, these guys, we don't know what they're going to be. Did he score 20 goals in the NHL? Absolutely. But what wins me a Stanley Cup? Is it Matthew Nyes? Because guess what? We've had Matthew Nyes the last 2 years, guys, and we got beat in the first round.
And let's be clear, Matthew Nyes is not those guys.
No, he's not. No, Matthew Nyes is a second-round pick. But you know why the Blues make this move? And this was the angle that we were looking at. The Blues make this move because it changes the trajectory of the team. Totally. You're bringing in a 23-year-old who is an RFA this upcoming year, by the way, so Toronto's probably going to have to pay him somewhere between $3 or $4 million, especially with the cap going up. You don't think a team would go out there and offer sheet the way that Doug just did to Dylan Holloway and Broberg. So if you're the Blues, you make this move. If you're Toronto, you say, we're making this move. Yes, it doesn't look good on paper, but one, Mitch Marner gets locked up to a long-term extension for us, and the guy's got the 4th most points in the National Hockey League right now. But two, we're bringing in a guy that helps us get to the Eastern Conference Final. And if that gets you there, in the eyes of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Matthew Nyes could go on to become Tage Thompson. But you look at that and you say, you know what? We got a Stanley Cup.
And if you're in the Blues side of things, and we've had a few people in the YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPN STL is where you can go to get involved in the chat. But we've had a few people say, guys, Matthew Nyes is not a game changer. He's just more of a complimentary piece. Cool. That's fine.
Well, and it's a piece that the Blues need an identity with, of a net front presence that goes to the net.
And even if he wasn't that, if I can get another Dylan Holloway, great.
And Dylan Holloway
awesome.
With at this point, I guess it wouldn't be, but $6.5 million not on the books for the next 3 years.
He's 23 years old, to where he played with Jimmy Snuggerud in Minnesota. That's a top 6 winger potential. Does he become a 45-goal scorer? Probably not. But you know what? You got a chance to find another star.
Now you're starting to build in the way where you can potentially have an elite forward group because of the lack of salary. So I'm going to have, let's call it $4 million, let's say, on some kind of a bridge deal for Matthew Nyes over the next few years. Mm-hmm. So I've removed $2.5 million and, 8 years, which means that Nyes is going to get better instead of declining. So he's probably a second-line winger for the next couple of years. So now I've got, at least in my top 6 I know for the foreseeable future, winger-wise, I've got Jordan Kyrou, I've got Dylan Holloway. I've got Matthew Nyes. I know that one of the centers in that top 6 group is going to be Robert Thomas and probably Dalibor Dvorsky, even if he's not ready to be that just yet.
And then you still have Snuggerud and Pavel Buchnevich.
Great.
And Bolduc.
And now I can go out with that money that I've now added to the roster, and I could be like, okay, for the next 5 years, I'm going to get a star. I don't know who that guy's going to be, but maybe I'm going to trade Zach Bolduc. I'm going to trade my first-round pick from this year that might be top 5 overall now that I'm trading Brayden Schenn, and I'm already in the mix for something like that.
Yeah.
And now I've got the kind of capital to go out to the market and be like, okay, we're targeting that guy. He's a disgruntled star that doesn't want to be where he's at. That's the guy we're plopping into our forward group. And now we have something that we can build around here. This is the kind of move that opens that all up for you. So I don't know if this is going to happen or not. But if Doug Armstrong is presented something at the deadline that makes sense to him, and that might be a first-round pick, that might be Matthew Nyes, that might be something that we have not discussed yet. It might not even be the Toronto Maple Leafs that end up making this move. It could be something completely different. This, to me, is the year that I think what the Blues are deciding at this year's trade deadline with Brayden Schenn. Are we going to have Brayden Schenn here for the next 3 years or not?
Yeah.
That's really the decision that you're making, because I don't think you're going to have another chance like this to get something real in return for him, because he's in the middle of a good season at the deadline when teams are desperate. And this is another important note. The deadline additions that are available right now, for the most part, stink.
Yeah.
Especially at forward.
Yep.
So you have one of the rare pieces that is actually capable of helping out somebody's top 6, especially at center. Blues are in an advantageous situation right
now. And the other reason why I think if you're the Blues, you're considering this move is it fast tracks the leadership to the younger players. And this is what they did with Alex Pietrangelo. Pietrangelo was 26 years old the offseason that they said Backes we're just not going to bring back, and they chose to give Pietrangelo the captaincy. Do I think Robert Thomas is ready to be the captain? This season I started to have my doubts, but he would be the clear-cut number 1 in that conversation. And when you go down that path, you're fast-tracking it to saying, cool, we've given this team a bunch of 23-year-olds that we believe have high-end talent. We've given the seat to Robert Thomas. You're the captain now of this team, and you try and figure it out moving forward.
Man.
The only one that I could come up with, too, by the way, that in recency of this ilk, but I don't believe he had any contract still tied to him, was Claude Giroux being traded to the Panthers.
He was on the final year of his deal.
Yeah, but that one, a final year of the deal, got them Owen Tippett, former first-round draft pick, a third-round pick, and a conditional first-round draft pick.
Man, when we first talked about this,
and he was 34 years old, I think.
When we first talked about this a few days ago, I said the idea of the Blues trading Brayden Schenn makes some sense to me. Like I get why you would do that at this year at the deadline. And I said at the time, I was like, man, maybe you get like a third-round pick in return, which is obviously that was way too low. That after thinking about it more and seeing some of these recent examples, Alex, I guess they're going to get something real. Which
That's the only reason you trade them. You trade them because you believe you could get something that helps you now. Otherwise, you don't move them.
But I think I go on the other side of this.
Yes,
I actually think it makes sense, even if you don't get a whole lot in return.
Well, but if you don't get anything in your return, you're eating contract no matter what, because nobody's going to take $6.5 million.
Maybe. And in that scenario, like if you're eating the salary, I think what you get in return is just commensurate to whatever it is that you eat.
Yeah.
If you don't end up eating salary, my thing would be like, I think it could be actually helpful for the Blues, given where they're at in their life cycle of an organization. They're not as far along as they thought they would be, to just go ahead and move the player. I think this is the year that you do it. And I don't say that. This is how I felt about Ivan Barbashev a couple of years ago, where it just, for where the Blues were at and what he was likely to get on the market, it made sense to trade him, even though it sucks to make that move because he's a really good hockey player and you just want to keep good hockey players. For where the Blues are at, what Brayden Schenn's age is, all of that, all of the context about the situation, I don't take any joy in saying this, but I think it makes sense to move him at this year's trade deadline. And it just sucks. There's a lot more that goes along with this, and we're going to get into it in the 1 o'clock hour. Leadership-wise, that's where I think the next story would begin.
Yeah, it's absolutely an aggressive move if you're the Blues that you can't be happy with where you're at, especially if you're picking in the top 10 again this year. And we thought the aggressive move was going to be one of Thomas Kyrou or Buchnevich, and it might still be. We don't know in the offseason. But at the trade deadline, that's sure as hell one way to make an aggressive move and a statement towards your team.
All right, with Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us. Did that live up to your hopes, Alex?
No.
I actually think I swayed BK a little bit more.
Yeah, Alex won. No, I conceded.
Oh, that was lame. You guys, if the YouTube folks and the radio people could have heard you guys in our pre-show meeting, I truly thought fists were going to fly.
We're friends, man. We're friends.
This is my boy.
No, you're not. That's the thing.
I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong, and I was wrong.
We're friends.
Alex was right, and I was wrong.
I'm willing to admit when
That
I
does
was
happen
right and I was
occasionally.
right. Now watch when he gets traded and it's a 7th-round pick. And I'm like, well, this is awkward. Hall & Oates
Ask us anything
2.0.
in 15 minutes. The Pro Football Hall of Fame got it right with Eli Manning next on 101 ESPN.
T-Bone here to tell you about Pick 6 from DraftKings, as Super Bowl 59 is this Sunday, and that means it's your last chance to play NFL Pick 6 this season. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first-timers. New Pick 6 customers can play $5 and get $59 in Pick 6 credits. Play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. Select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. I'm looking at Saquon Barkley less than 112.5 rush yards, with Travis Kelce more than 62.5 receiving yards, and Mahomes more than 251.5 passing yards. $10 on that can win you 40 plus. And Chiefs Kingdom, win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use my code 101WXOS. That's code 101WXOS for new customers to play $5 and get $59 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Void or prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awards, non-drawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Blues lost to the Florida Panthers 2-1. They are off today and back in action tomorrow, welcoming in the Chicago Blackhawks. Pregame is at 5 and puck drop is at 6. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
And T-Bone on BK. So the Pro Football Hall of Fame announced their newest class last night. I was a little surprised that it was as small as it was. They only took 3 modern players in this year's class. The one guy that ended up getting in on what is effectively the NFL's version of the Veterans Committee, that was Sterling Sharp. T-Bone was big mad about that last night. He can explain that for you. But Sterling Sharp, a very deserving Pro Football Hall of Famer. So congratulations to him.
Yeah, you did. Man, 2 fights for BK. There's a common theme to this show, ladies and gentlemen.
Eric Allen and Jared Allen both get in. I think both were deserving. Jared Allen, I underestimated his career.
We both underestimated him yesterday.
Dude, every player ahead of him on the sacks list in the history of the NFL is into the Pro Football Hall of Fame other than Terrell Suggs. And Terrell Suggs is going to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So Jared Allen, a deserving Hall of Famer. We end up getting 4 last night. Sterling Sharp being the other, and then who am I missing here? The 4th member of the Hall of Fame this year. Why am I blanking on who it was?
Gates.
Antonio Gates, one of the best tight ends in the history of the league.
Jared Allen had 22 sacks in one season.
Yeah, Jared Allen was
good
amazing.
God, man.
I think I forgot how long he was that good for. But the headline really last night was who didn't get in, more so than who did get in. And the big one there was Eli Manning. And it doesn't sound like Eli was particularly close. The guys that ended up being part of the final 7 among the modern players, according to reports that have come out after the fact, Willie Anderson, former NFL offensive tackle, Luke Kuechly, former NFL linebacker, who was a 5-time All-Pro in a 7-year NFL career, Adam Vinatieri, who we talked about yesterday, and, of course, Torrey Holt. Those were the 4 that got the closest, that did not end up getting in and passing the 80% threshold to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Alex, what did you make of the class that was officially announced last night?
I'm surprised. I really was, because frankly, I thought it should have been a little bit of a bigger class. I think you should have seen Torrey Holt in that group, and Vinatieri, I thought, should have been in that group.
I agree.
I don't understand why you take such a small group when you can give it up to 8, I believe is what you said that they get in there. But the biggest surprise, and I guess it shouldn't be a surprise, I've just kind of stuck to the mindset of Eli Manning being a Hall of Famer. And this kind of proves the point against me, them saying like he wasn't even close to getting in. I mean, on one hand, I think the playoff success and the success that you've had in Super Bowls should play into the mindset of you being a Hall of Famer. But I also can't deny the guy who's got a legit 500 record in the regular season and has thrown almost as many interceptions as he has touchdowns. So I can understand why Eli Manning wasn't even close in this one. I just thought there should have been a few more Hall of Famers in this list, not just 4 of them.
To me, Eli Manning isn't a Hall of Famer. Now, he will eventually get in. I truly do believe that. I think it might take a little longer than people anticipated, because it seems like the Hall of Fame committee views it more similarly to what I view it as. I mean, if he wasn't even one of the other finalists for this year, he's not close right now.
And it's only going to get harder.
I was going to say, the quarterbacks that are going to be coming up very soon, I don't know how he gets in over those guys.
He's not going to get in over his brother. He's not going to get in over Brady. He's not going to get in over next year. You've got Drew Brees on the list as well. He's not, like, Larry Fitzgerald's going to enter the ballot next year as well.
He gets over Phillip Rivers, though, right?
He'll get in over Rivers. Yeah. I think Rivers was the better quarterback, but it doesn't matter because he doesn't have the Super Bowls. And Eli Manning, to his credit, went on 2 of the greatest runs that we've ever seen in the postseason. If he had one of those, I don't think he ends up getting into the Hall of Fame. But to do it twice and to do it against the 16-0 Patriots as well, that being one of them, one of the greatest teams I've ever seen, he's going to get a lot of credit for that, deservedly. So I just I do think that there were a few guys like Luke Kuechly, looking at his resume, man, a 5-time All-Pro in a 7-year NFL career.
It's just such a small sample size to be the linebacker and get in, you know?
I know T-Bone's on that same path with you. Like, that's why he doesn't think Sterling Sharp should have gotten in. I know there's some people on the text line that say, guys, how could Sterling Sharp get in over Torrey Holt? It was basically two different ballots.
Yeah.
One is on, like, what is effectively the Veterans Committee. The other is on the modern ballot. So it wasn't a Torrey versus Sterling Sharp. It's really like Torrey versus Steve Smith versus all of these other guys that are potentially getting in. I think Torrey will get in. I think Steve Smith will get in eventually, but he just didn't get in this year. When I look at what you had with whether it's Luke Kuechly or Sterling Sharp, I really do value. Terrell Davis was the same thing. I value that peak. I value being the best at your position for a 7-year stretch more than I do like Frank Gore is on the ballot next year. You guys know my opinions of Frank Gore. Frank Gore was a stat accumulator, and he just played for a really, really long time in the NFL. That doesn't make you one of the best to ever do it. Yes, you're going to put up numbers that have you on those lists. I don't know that I ever viewed Frank Gore as a top 3 to 5 running back in the NFL.
Shut your mouth. Unbelievable.
So that I am more interested in the peak than I am the longevity. We had this conversation before the show today, T-Bone. I think Antonio Brown is a no doubt about a Hall of Famer despite all of his off-field issues. Like, if we just go with the on-field product, Antonio Brown was one of the best receivers I've ever seen in my life.
For a long stretch of time, too.
Like 7 years.
Yeah.
It's actually shorter than you would think.
But, I mean, Pittsburgh, like, when he was there, he was the best receiver in the game.
Yeah.
And that's what it was for Sterling Sharp. He was the second best receiver in the NFL while he was in the NFL, behind only Jerry Rice. Now, his numbers, if you look at them today for today's standards, don't hold up to what the current version of the NFL looks like.
You can now watch 101 ESPN live on our Air Alliance Team Studio Cams. Catch every show live on our YouTube channel or at 101ESPN.com. 101 ESPN Studio Cams.
Presented by the Air Alliance Team Heating and Cooling. Getting the job done quickly, correctly, 100% of the time.
T.R. Hughes Homes has great prices on beautiful new homes at 4 desirable locations. trhughes.com.
Hey, it's Kerry Davis, and fellas, if you could benefit from a little extra.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the ENB Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. ENB Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers on 101 ESPN.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. We're back.
We're back, baby.
It's a Friday. We're at our studio, and sometimes things happen. Technology is what it is. All right. I was finishing a thought. It was long-winded. It took too long, and YouTube didn't want us to continue it anymore. But
one of our listeners.
My basic question was this. T-Bone, do you value more the longevity or the prime of a career? And we'll get to some of your questions for Ask Us Anything here in just a moment. But for you, when you think about the Hall of Fame, whether it's baseball, NFL, whatever, do you value more the prime peak years or a guy that goes out there and just plays really well for a really long time?
I value longevity more than I value just the prime peak years, because I think doing it at a high level for a long period of time is more impressive than doing it for like a 5-year stretch, right? Like, that's my whole thing with Sterling Sharp. I don't mind that he's in the Hall of Fame, but when I can look at him and he had 7 years, 5 like elite years, by the way, of those 7, well, 5 years is like a rookie quarterback contract now. Like, that's nothing, right? That's nothing to me. I value the guys that are in the league for, maybe it's 13 years, and maybe they weren't the best at their position for 13 years, but they were some of the best guys at that position for like 10 of those 13 years, and then at the back end, it just happens because they get older. Like, I value longevity more than I do the peak.
I think mine's kind of a mix of both. Mine's peak years being the best at your position or one of the best, but you do have to have like a 10-plus year stretch. Because to beat a Hall of Famer, it's hard for me to look at that and say, well, he played 5 or 6 years and then called it a career. And maybe he was the best at his position for those 5 to 6 years, but, man, there's guys that play 12, 13 years that are top 10 in that position that could be in that conversation.
Yeah, and I would rather have the guy that was the best. Like, that's why I view Terrell Davis as just, he was such an obvious can't-miss Hall of Fame candidate. He only had a 4-year NFL career, basically. After that, it was just, he had 200, 700 yards. It was over. Those 4 years were so unbelievably good, including 2 of them where he was literally the best player in the NFL, you could make an argument. MVP in 1998 during the regular season, and then had one of the unbelievable postseasons that we've ever seen. The only thing that I can compare it to is what we saw this year from Saquon Barkley. That guy's a Hall of Famer to me, despite the fact that it was only a 4-year stretch. So if he's a Hall of Famer, I would say the same thing is true of Sterling Sharp, and I would say the same thing is true of Luke Kuechly. I do believe that Luke Kuechly will eventually get in probably next year on the ballot. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line. All right, from the 314, guys, I have a question for you all. Do any of you order your steaks well done? I do not. I'm a medium to medium rare guy, typically.
I used to be well done, but I've since switched to medium.
I'm a well done guy.
Are you?
Yeah,
oh,
I'm
man.
a well done guy. Now,
our text line's going to yell at you, just so you know.
Yeah, I don't
That's
really
just dry, man.
I will say this. I don't typically, like, if I'm at a place, I'd rather have anything but a steak, right? Like, I don't eat steaks that often, but when I do get them well done.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Guys, who do you think was the better quarterback, Mahomes or Brady? Forget accomplishment. Who would you rather have as your quarterback?
Yeah, we said this yesterday. Mine would be Mahomes.
Yeah, I would go Mahomes as well, but I understand the argument for Brady. He's the only guy that I would take otherwise. From the 314, guys, moving forward, do you think that the Blues should go all in on their youth movement? So I'm guessing that would mean trade Justin Falk, trade Suter, anybody basically over the age of 30, you go ahead and get off the
I would
books.
get rid of the players that don't play into your... If you believe you can be a competitive playoff team in 2 years, I'd be getting rid of the players that aren't going to be here beyond 2 years. And that would fall into Falk, would fall into Letty, would fall into Schenn, it would fall into Sundqvist, Matthew Joseph, Texier. Like, I would be looking at guys that you've said, you know what, we've seen enough from this. I think this is enough. And then you do lean into this. The problem with that, though, is as soon as you lean into that and bring all the guys up from the American Hockey League, you take the chance of those guys' growth getting stunted, too.
From the 314, are you guys surprised at the breakdown of the NFL's MVP vote? It ended up going last night to Josh Allen. He won the MVP despite Lamar Jackson getting the first-team All-Pro nod. Josh Allen ended up getting 27 first-place votes. Lamar Jackson got 23. Those were the 50 votes. It was split between the two guys. And then the only second-place votes that didn't go to one of Allen or Jackson went to Saquon and Joe Burrow. Those were the other two spots that ended up getting one. I was surprised by it just because typically the way that this goes is it goes to the All-Pro nod for the first-team quarterback. That is the MVP, and Lamar Jackson won that, so I was a bit surprised that it went to Allen. I don't think he was undeserving. I was fine. I didn't care either way. I thought both guys were deserving of winning the MVP this year, and I didn't have a strong argument one way or the other, but I was surprised by the ultimate answer of it going to Josh Allen.
I think they got it right. I think Josh Allen was the MVP, and I can understand the first-team All-Pro for Lamar Jackson because he had a sensational season, but when I think of the most valuable player to their team, a team that got first place in their division and a team that was good from start to finish, I think of Josh Allen in that Buffalo Bills squad.
Yeah, I thought they got it wrong because I thought it was Lamar. I think Lamar was the MVP. I mean, I think it shows when he gets first-team All-Pro ahead of Josh Allen. I was shocked that it got flipped. I think it was like the first time it's happened since I think it was when Peterson won the MVP.
2003 was the last time. Okay. Steve McNair, looking at quarterbacks. If you're looking at the quarterback that won the MVP but did not get first-team All-Pro, the last time that happened was Steve McNair, who shared the MVP with Peyton Manning after Manning was the All-Pro back in 2003. And then John Elway beat out Jerry Rice and Joe Montana for the MVP back in 1987. And Montana was the All-Pro for that first-team quarterback. So it's only happened over the last, really, 40 years, twice prior to this year.
Yeah, and again, like Josh Allen had an MVP caliber year, so it's not the end of the world that he got it. I just think Lamar's season was better, and I was surprised that they had that flipped. I would have voted for Lamar Jackson for MVP.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys can check us out on YouTube as well, youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. In about 15 minutes, guys, the Cardinals have done it. They officially made a move. They were the last team in Major League Baseball to add to their 40-man roster this offseason, but they have officially done it. We'll give you all the details in every possible way in 15 minutes. But coming up next, Mike McKenna, former NHL goalie. He joins us for his weekly hit here on BK and Ferrario.
Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. We're going between the pipes with former NHL goaltender Mike McKenna.
How do you like me now?
Between the Pipes is refreshed by Macadoodle Spirits, fine wine, beer, and cigars. Now open in Darden Prairie.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, we got Jordan Deacon doing a fantastic job for us back in the studio today as we are broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center, and we are happy to be joined via the Callier and Thompson hotline by Mike McKenna, former NHL goalie. He joins us each and every Friday on BK and Ferrario on behalf of Macadoodles. Mike, appreciate the time as always, my friend. How are you doing today?
Just fantastic. Just great. How are you guys doing today?
We could be better, Mike. Not going to lie to you. The Blues, I don't know if you've noticed, but they've won one game in regulation since January 18th.
I haven't noticed.
It is February the 7th, and that's not exactly what you want.
No, but we also don't want to live and die by one team here. There's more to life, like having fun at Macadoodles. But we'll talk about that in a second.
Nice.
I feel, you know what, guys, I feel you. I get it. It's kind of hard for me to really feel that bad after last night's game, where I thought the Blues played pretty well for a lot of it, and even in stretches against Edmonton that weren't poor either. You know, so it's what we've seen all season long. What team are you getting, right? It can't be the Colorado game from recently. Woof, we know that. But last night, man, that's what gives you glimmers of hope with this club. It's there. It's just it's right at the cusp. You know, you can feel it, and then it just gets ripped away from you.
Yeah, Mike, in those two games that you're referencing, they got superstarred. They got Connor McDavid, they got Leon Draisaitl, and they got Matthew Tkachuk. So, we've talked about this a lot this week. So from a former NHLer's perspective, can you win in today's game without having a superstar on your roster?
It's tough. It really is. When you look at the teams that have won Stanley Cups recently, look at the teams that have been contending, they all have them. I mean, shoot, Vegas has a couple of them, but, you know, even them getting a Jack Eichel and an underrated player and a Mark Stone and how good Pietrangelo, as much as we hate to say that, St. Louisans and all, you know, they're real. Look at Tampa when they were winning. Kucherov, Stamkos, Hedman, Vasilevsky, like, it comes back to drafting and developing. I think the Blues have done a great job of that. But who's the home run from the club right now? You know, I mean, Robert Thomas has knocked on that door a few times. You know, is Dvorsky going to be that? It's just not quite there with the Blues in terms of the top end. I still think you can win. I think you can grind, but to have the ultimate trump card, talent like that, when you're talking of a Draisaitl or a Matthew Tkachuk or somebody named McDavid, it really can be the X factor. And we just haven't seen that for a little while with the Blues.
McCarr, McKinnon, I mean, these teams at the top of the standings right now, it's crazy the amount of talent that they have. And it goes even beyond that. I think the two might be connected because you look at the teams that they've played recently, whether it's Edmonton, Colorado, Vancouver, Dallas, last night with Florida. That's their last 5 losses. And in those games, Mike, we have seen the Blues outchanced 64-25 at 5-on-5 in the first period alone. And high danger chances are in favor of the opposition 27-8, again, in their last 5 first periods that they have lost the game. What do you make of the Blues' struggles early on in these games to be able to get going?
It's that lack of finishing just isn't there. And that can relate to top-end talent. I think there's something to be said, though, for even mixing lines around, even though we've seen pretty good chemistry lately out of having their top group back together with Kyrou, Thomas, and Buchnevich. There's some institutional knowledge of playing with one another. And there's a reason why, you know, Schenn, Holloway, and Kyrou were doing so well. They were together for a long time. But I really just think it's the lack of finish. It's the lack of direct hockey as well. You know, even last night, look how the Blues scored. Simple stuff, man. Get it to the point, get it to the net. Like, not tough, right? And those aren't even grade A chances that they scored on. So, I think it's a little bit of all that. I think there's also nervousness in the room in some ways. Like they feel the pressure. You're not that far away from make it or break it with trade deadline. You're not that far away from the Stanley Cup playoffs at this point. Even though we're in early January, you start to feel that, early February, you start to feel that pressure. And I think they've been a little bit tight recently with the puck on their blade. That's going to have to change. They're going to have to loosen up a little bit to score more goals.
How do you change that, Mike? Because it's 3 years, I think, now with this year included, to where it feels like when the temperature rises to the spot where the Blues need to find wins, the players just don't follow through with it.
Well, it relates back to what we just talked about. Who's going to be the player to pick the team up and do it themselves? Like, you need that sometimes. Who is it? Honestly, like I love the players on this team, but if I'm on the opposing team looking at the Blues lineup, I don't feel a nervousness attached to one specific player on the team. You know, if we're playing the Dallas Stars, I feel a nervousness attached to Jason Robertson or Rope Hintz. I don't think other teams feel that yet. Even with Robert Thomas, Kyrou, it's just not quite the same. It is a scoring by committee with the Blues. And that's the game changer. Somebody's got to emerge to do that, to put the team on their shoulders. And waiting. Like we talked last week, does it come time to make a trade? Right? Like can you get a top-end player that's a game changer? Well, maybe, but you could also get stuck with a Jonathan Huberdeau if you make the wrong deal. So it's such a tightrope, man. And there's some ways, like, everybody wants to be a GM until you're a GM. I feel for Doug Armstrong because he's with some really good players and a pretty damn good team that keeps sitting in the middle of the field, and you're just kind of missing those top-end guys to really get you over the hump.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the potential trade market as we're talking with Mike McKenna, former NHL goalie. He joins us each and every Friday here on BK and Ferrario on behalf of Macadoodles, one of the players that has now seen his name being brought up in trade conversations. And this doesn't mean that a deal's going to happen. We saw this last year with Pavel Buchnevich, where his name was out there in all of the rumors, and then suddenly he's not traded at the deadline. He ends up signing a long-term contract to stay here in St. Louis. So that is important context to what I'm about to say. But we have now heard from Darren Drager, Elliot Friedman. We saw a report on Toronto radio, and then now today over on Sportsnet, they put out a new trade list, and it includes Brayden Schenn's name. And it says in this write-up, despite his age, term, and no trade clause, if the stars align and Armstrong convinces him to move on to a contender, the Blues general manager would, quote, want a king's ransom for him, and if he gets it, he'll have to weigh out the pros and cons of retaining enough salary to close out any potential deal, end quote. Mike, I just wanted to say that as the backdrop to the question that I'm about to ask you, because it would be a surprise to trade the captain of this team. Do you think that is something, given where the Blues are at right now, and given Schenn's contract and his age, that would make sense for the Blues to explore this year at the trade deadline?
I think it has to be asked the other way around. Does it make sense for any team to obtain him at this stage? And I don't mean that as a slight on Brayden Schenn, because he's playing the best hockey I've seen in a long time. He's playing hard. He's obviously healthy. What's the value there? What are you going to give up to get Brayden Schenn? Is it going to be a king's ransom? That's the problem I see. I don't see, when the trade market shakes out, there being enough on the table for Doug Armstrong to make that trade. That's how I see it more than anything. Because if you're going to move your captain, if you're going to move the heartbeat of a team, the guy who's bled for you, who's won a cup for you, who's done everything, it's got to be a haul, and it's got to be a haul that's going to make your team good for the next 6 to 7 years. I just don't think that trade's going to exist. That's my gut feeling on it. So if it's out there, if somebody's willing to do that, if Julian Breezeblock calls from Tampa and for some reason he thinks he needs Brayden Schenn that bad and he's going to give you, something in return that makes sense, maybe. I just don't see it happening. That's my hardest part with this. So could they do it? Yeah. Could the Blues shake it up? They could. But then you look at the vacuum. Is Parayko your captain? What's the fallout effect of it? If the name's being dangled out there, it's probably not a smokescreen. So I'm sure it's being talked about in some capacity, but I just don't think that there would be enough return out there on the market for Schenn for the Blues to pull trigger on.
Who can you move then, Mike, if you're the Blues and you feel like a change-up is needed?
And do you walk that path of we have to make a change to make a change for making a change's sake? You have to get better. You can't just shake it up to shake it. You have to get better. You've got prospects in your lineup, and half the reason why you have a lot of draft picks is that so you have tangible assets. And so it's not just Dvorsky we're talking about. You've also got some other really high-end players. Snuggerud in that mix. The defenseman that was so good at World Juniors last year, Swedish kid it's Lind, and I can't remember the rest of it.
Stenberg, Lindstein.
Swedes. Thank you very much. I'm married to a Lindstrand, and I've known Lindstroms and all these, and it throws me off every year. That's the route you're going to have to take if you're going to shake something up. I said this the other day, though, that in my eyes, if the Blues really are trying to get a player back in return, they'd have to part ways with Jake Neighbors. And that's the hardest thing that could ever – to me, that'd be the hardest decision they could make.
You're talking about if they wanted to get a star, right?
That's right. Because if you're moving Brayden Schenn, like your choices for captain are either going to be Neighbors or Parayko or maybe Thomas, right? Like to me, it's Neighbors. And that's where you'd have to go. Like, that's the level of gut check you'd have to have. And to me, making a trade just to make a trade and shake things up, you're not moving Jake Neighbors for that. So it's got to make a team better. It's got to be tangible. It's got to be for Brady Tkachuk. Right? Something like that.
That last name it's just forever going to haunt us. Every time that guy rolls into town, he finds a way to put 2 goals and 3 points up.
He's available.
Yeah.
He's out there.
2 goals from Matthew last night.
Calgary,
he's a killer.
Calgary was like, hey, we got to move the guy. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'd love to go to St. Louis and Florida. And then
he went to Florida.
And then he just chose Orlando.
So it's fine. We'll
does
talk
he
about
know
the
that
geography of Florida
it's Sunrise, Florida? I know where it is. It's close enough. But does he know Disney World was supposed to be originally in St. Louis?
That's true. And then St. Louis said no.
Oh, my God. Why do we always say no to good things?
All right. Mike McKenna is a fantastic guest. We love having him on the show. We're going to quit wasting his time about geography and where places are in Orlando or in Florida. Mike, tell us about the great things that are taking place right now out at Macadoodles.
Well, we're not going to build a Macadoodles north of 270 on the Mississippi River like Walt Disney World was supposed to be built. So what we're doing here, we just had a great event last night where Demetrius Kane from Nobleton's Distilling out in Union, Missouri came in and put on a great show, had some pours, had some Sugar Fire barbecue from next door. We're going to be doing a lot of that. Next month we'll have a couple of other producers, Blacksmith and Wood Hat, come in and do that. But right now what we're doing is gearing up for the Super Bowl. We're running high noon at a great cost, great price. We've got plenty of 30-packs hanging back there, all your faves, Busch Light. We just got in a couple of different Yinglings, Yingling Flight, you name it. All the great prices on our shelves. Coming up this month, a couple fun things. We've got a chocolate and wine pairing that's going to be taking place in advance of Valentine's Day. All of these things you can find all over our social media. Macadoodles Dardine Prairie. We just got in Pineapple Deep Eddy. It's a huge hit out in Wing Haven. We're hoping to cash in on that. I'll tell you, we got 12 on the shelf and they're going. So those are the big things. And then in March, this is the first that's going to be public on it, but March 13th, we've got an Irish Whiskey Festival taking place from 4 to 6 p.m. on the 13th, and we are going to have tastings. We are going to have high-end whiskeys available, Redbreast 21, 27 year, highly allocated. We'll have them in the building along with a bunch of other things. So we're looking forward to those events, but we've got everyday great pricing, tastings all day long here at Macadoodles Dardine Prairie, and I keep seeing people from St. Peter's youth hockey roll through, which is always fun.
He's Mike McKenna, one of the best in the business. We always enjoy catching up with him on Fridays here on BK and Ferrario. Go say hello to him and the great people over at Macadoodles out in Dardine Prairie. Mike, appreciate the time as always, my friend. We'll talk with you again next week.
That sounds great. Let's hope for some big wins this week. Lots of goals, some great goaltending as always. That'd make everybody happy.
No doubt about it.
It's been good the last 2.
And we got one more before this break. Mike, appreciate the time. That is Mike McKenna, former NHL goalie, joins us each and every Friday here on BK and Ferrario on behalf of the great folks over at Macadoodles. Alex, I think he makes an interesting point. I mean, the thing with Jake Neighbors is he's basically your version of Matthew Knies, right? In terms of like how they're viewed, how they're valued across the NHL right now. So if that's the thing that as a Blues fan you'd be excited about getting potentially from the Maple Leafs in return for your captain, I would imagine the same thing would be true vice versa of somebody else acquiring Jake Neighbors to be able to, make the switch and go a little younger for that team. I don't see that as something that the Blues are going to be interested in, though.
No,
nor would I, frankly.
Yeah, and it really comes down, like in a normal situation, like at the draft, this trade does not take place. But circumstances are different when you feel like you're on the cusp of winning a Stanley Cup, or at least competing for a Stanley Cup. And if you're Toronto, Mitch Marner's having one of his best seasons. William Nylander's playing well. Austin Matthews is playing well. This is where you just have to ask yourself, what are we missing that puts us over the rest? And if I'm Toronto, I'm looking at what the Florida Panthers do and how they play. They're a physical brand team. I look at how the New York Rangers have played since they've acquired JT Miller. JT Miller has brought a little nastiness to that team in New York. Tampa always plays that way. What's Washington got that you don't got? They got a Tom Wilson. I'm not saying Brayden Schenn's Tom Wilson. Sure. But if I'm Toronto, I have to look at the other teams I'm competing with and say, what do they have that we don't have?
My concern if I'm Toronto, just to finish this thing off, if I trade Matthew Nyes, who's playing on that top wing, and if I move up one of those guys from the second line to the top line, well, now who's filling that spot? So, yes, you are filling a hole that they have right now as that second line center. You're also creating a new one, and Matthew Nyes has been playing on that top line with Austin Matthews.
And that's the unfortunate part about being a team that is tanked so long and you get great players. You've got 3 Hall of Fame players. Like, you're going to build yourself around that. I mean, in Toronto's sense, you'd look at this and say, well, Bobby McKenna on our team right now has 3 goals less than Matthew Nyes. Can he play in that position because they're bringing in Brayden Schenn to push John Tavares down, or to push John Tavares to the wing so that they can create a little bit more depth. I don't know, man. On paper, again, it looks like a crazy trade, but I know teams get desperate when they want a Stanley Cup. But if you're Toronto, you're probably the most desperate team right now with the window that you have in front of you.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, if you want to hear our extended thoughts on the Brayden Schenn speculation, you can get into that on the podcast page after the show today. You can hear Mike McKenna on that podcast page after the show as well. Coming up next, the Cardinals finally made a move. It does technically affect their Major League roster, and it's the most Cardinals move you could possibly expect. We'll tell you about it next year on 101 ESPN.
live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios. This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Cardinals made a move.
What?
Yeah, big news, ladies and gentlemen. The Cardinals have officially added a player to their 40-man roster. They were the final team in Major League Baseball to do so, and they made a big one. Michael Hellman be added to the big league roster.
Hell yeah, man.
They got him in exchange for cash considerations.
Oh, what? We can't afford that.
Yeah, wait.
Wait. We can't add to the payroll when we haven't moved Arenado.
Or is this considering giving you cash, but that's only if we trade Nolan Arenado?
Yeah, I don't know. Gave him $1, didn't we?
He is 28 years old. He spent a little bit of time in the big leagues last year. He got 9 games under his belt and a total of 10 at-bats. This is a pure depth move. I saw earlier today, Derek Gould wrote about it up in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. He said he's played every position other than catcher in his career in the minor leagues. So he can play anywhere. He's a fine bat, it seems like. This is like their version of Jose Fermin. They just got their new version of Jose Fermin, who will probably spend most of the year next year down in AAA, and occasionally, if they've got some significant injuries at the big league level, he can come up and play a bit for them at the big league level. But that's it. That was their first big hoorah!
Hell yeah, man.
Their foray into the Major League Baseball offseason.
You did, remember, when in warm-up, you were there covering, and John Mozeliak said, ideally, we would love to get a power bat off of the bench.
A right-handed bat specifically.
Yeah, well, this ain't him.
They got him.
No.
I do wonder... I know this sounds ridiculous. The one actual take that I have here, it's possible this is the guy that ends up on your big league roster instead of Thomas Ajacey in the event that they can't trade Nolan Arenado, because you don't want Ajacey just sitting on the bench every day. And if Arenado's here, that would be his role, is literally to just be on the bench.
Oh, so this is our Mater.
Yeah, what Mater should have been is what this potentially could be for you. He can play backup to every position on the field. If you need somebody late in a game, maybe you put him out there. But for the most part, his role is literally to be on the roster and to not play. It sounds like a waste of a roster spot to some. I get it, but it's kind of a role that needs to be filled on a lot of baseball teams. He's potentially the guy that does it.
Here's a legit question that I have. Do you think if you were a player and you were traded for cash considerations, do you call that team back and say, how much cash did you get for me?
Yeah. I think it's something that you probably want to know. I think there have been some players that have been traded for a literal $1.
Yeah, and I think this was it
in their history. So
there was a guy that was claimed off of waivers by the Detroit Red Wings that was claimed for $1, and then he went on to win 3 Stanley Cups with them. So. I don't know if I'd want to know that, though. Be like, yeah, we gave you up for we needed $500.
I want to know when this guy's press conference is, since he's our only big league move today.
That will be at spring training when he's locked up to a 5-year extension.
The Pirates held one for Rich Hill. Can't this guy get one?
The Pirates held one for Rich Hill.
He was a .270 hitter last year in the minors. He had a decent season production-wise. This is not a real prospect. He's not somebody that should be expected to impact the big league roster in any meaningful way. He's going to be here potentially. It might not even make it to the regular season as a part of the
Let's go Cardinals.
But that's their big addition. So
let's go Cardinals.
Good job, Cardinals. Way to go. Yeah.
Hey, I shouldn't laugh. I made fun of when they claimed Ciani. Now he's our starting center fielder.
Yeah, it's a fine move. I've got no problem with it.
Is it?
Yeah, I think
sure.
it's fine.
Whatever. They gave up nothing for him. They had a 40-man roster spot available.
Cash.
So whatever.
But we're cash strapped. DeWitt's probably out there at Busch Stadium with a coffee can and begging for money right now.
In 15 minutes, we're going to get into the junk drawer. But next, one of our favorite guests. We typically get him right around this time and then right before the NHL draft. Twice a year is typically the way that we can get him. Craig Button, former NHL executive, now does a bunch of stuff with TSN. He's going to join us next. I promise you, he is not going to pull any punches. He'll tell you exactly how it is for the St. Louis Blues, and he joins us next year on 101 ESPN.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The SportsCenter update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Last night, the Blues lost to the Florida Panthers by a score of 2-1. They're off today and back in action tomorrow, welcoming in the rival Chicago Blackhawks. Pregame is at 5 and puck drop is at 6. But before that, on 101 ESPN, we have Oklahoma versus Tennessee college basketball action for you, with pregame starting at 10:30. Kicking it off on Sunday, Super Bowl action, of course, right here for you on 101 ESPN. Coverage starts at 1. I'm Jordan Deacon. The SportsCenter update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley, and we are happy to go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline. We typically talk to Craig Button, former NHL exec, now with TSN up in Canada. About twice a year, Alex. Once right around this time of the year before the trade deadline, and then again we try to give him a call right around the NHL draft. He's one of the best in the business doing it. He put out his top 50 prospects list today. We'll get into that with him about some of the Blues' top prospects as well. But we were happy to be joined by Craig Button now on BK and Ferrario. Craig, appreciate the time as always. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really well. Super Bowl Sunday, it's always an exciting time. And the Four Nations tournament couldn't start at any better time. Spring training is just beginning. Football season's over, so they're going to have the full attention for hockey fans. I think it's great.
Craig, we're going to get into the hockey side of things here in just a second, but out of curiosity, who you got on Sunday?
Listen, I'm not betting against the Chiefs. I like dynasties. I'm a Patriots fan. So, you know what? I'm all in on dynasties.
That's what I like.
I was kind of hoping you'd say Eagles, though, Craig, because my co-host here, Brandon Kiley, is a Chiefs honk, and frankly, it just gets annoying hearing him talk about him after a while.
Craig, I want to apologize on behalf of the rest of America, but specifically Chiefs fans. I hated the Patriots, absolutely hated them for 20 years, and now suddenly, now that my team is the one that I grew up rooting for, I was a Chiefs fan growing up, now that my team is the one that is hated, I understand why Patriots fans were so insufferable for 20 years. I get it now suddenly.
Yeah, I don't know if you have to be insufferable, right? It's kind of, and some fans, I mean, hey, listen, I never thought I was insufferable, but at the time you celebrate success, and the Patriots were a benchmark for it. The Chiefs now are certainly, with Andy Reid and everything he's done and Mahomes, I mean, we're talking about greatness here, and I think we should celebrate it. But you know how it goes. Oh, we need a new winner. We don't want that. We don't want that. We don't like them and everything. And I mean, I get it. I mean, you're going to root for the team that you like, and certainly, the Patriots are a team now that's near the bottom. And I love watching good football. I appreciate top teams. I appreciate great coaching and certainly great quarterbacking and everything that goes with it. So it's fun, and that's not to take away from the Philadelphia Eagles. I got lots of family in the Philadelphia area, so they won't like the fact that I'm rooting for the Chiefs.
Well, Craig, we were hoping that greatness was going to come back with the St. Louis Blues this season, and unfortunately for them, it has not found them this season. Big picture view, Craig, because I know you watch all of the National Hockey League. What stands out to you about the Blues' inconsistencies this year?
It's interesting. So, I'll get into the specifics as we carry forth. But where do the Blues find themselves? Right in the mushy middle. They're right in the mushy middle. So let's look at last night's game. They play well enough defensively, can't score. So now they end up on the wrong side of the game. And I think that's what happens when you're in the middle of the pack. That's what call it the mushy middle. I mean, could they maybe find a way to inch into the playoffs? Yeah, they're not a contender. Could they find a way to just miss the playoffs? Yeah, that's what the mushy middle is. And I think the reality of it for the St. Louis Blues is you are who you are. You're 50 games into the season. You're not going, oh boy, we're underperforming. They're not great offensively. They have a tough time scoring. Defensively, they're okay. They're in that mushy middle. They're right kind of probably where you expect them to be. Penalty killing's terrible, and their discipline isn't very good. So you start to put those things together. Goaltending's okay. You start to put all that together, and you go, okay, wait a sec. This plus this plus this plus this plus this equals mushy middle. So the St. Louis Blues, to me, are exactly who they are. And so how does that improve? Well, it improves with younger players, maturing and getting better. It comes with an upgrade in talent. And I think that's exactly where the St. Louis Blues find themselves.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about as a follow-up question, Craig, because as we've seen what the Blues have gone up against in recent games, I mean, they've played some of the best teams in the NHL. They've gone up against Edmonton, last night Florida, Colorado, Vancouver, Dallas. These are the teams that they're losing against, and all of them have superstars for the most part. And that is something that the Blues have really lacked, I mean, for 20 years, but certainly right now. Is it possible in your mind at this point in the NHL, with the way the teams are constructed, to win a title or to be a true contender, as you described it, without having one of those legit superstars?
It would be hard for me to say no, considering the fact that the Blues won the Cup in 2019, with a really good, strong team effort and what I would call a really complete and deep team. And when we look at it, and certainly you just mentioned, the teams with top players and all that goes with it. I think it's a lot more difficult to win without those signature players, shall we call them, in your lineup. And I think, like a lot of teams, you're trying to figure out a way how to get those players. You can draft players and you get excited about your prospects and you say, okay, this guy's going to be able to play. But the superstars move the needle, and the superstars move the needle in ways that other players can't. Even the very good players, even the top-notch players, can't move the needle in the same way that the superstars can. And so when you think about losing to the Edmonton Oilers, well, Leon Draisaitl, ends up taking the game over, and he's a superstar, right? So you're in the game, and then Draisaitl goes, I'm moving the needle in my team's direction, and the St. Louis Blues don't have that. So it is difficult, and is it impossible? No, but the probabilities become a lot less. Now let me add one thing to that: with the salary cap going up, and the certainty with the salary cap payroll range over the next 3 years, I think there's going to be a lot of different opportunities for teams to be able to act, to try to find those players, because some teams are not going to be able to, they're going to say, listen, we can't afford that. Because it's great to say that the salary cap, the ceiling's going to be here, but the floor is also going up. And there's going to be teams just on a straight operating revenue basis that aren't going to want to be much over the floor. That's reality of the business. But because of the cap going up so much, that means there's going to be opportunity for teams that are willing to spend a little bit more, spend more to the cap, spend considerably above the floor to try to explore opportunities to find these players. And they come about in different ways. Look at the Vegas Golden Knights. Look at how they got Jack Eichel. He's a superstar. He moves the needle. They got him because they were bold, and they said, this is a guy that can help us. And wouldn't it be nice if the Buffalo Sabres? They had him. They drafted him second overall. What a monumental mistake.
So, Craig, when it comes to guys like Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, and even Pavel Buchnevich, because the Blues obviously believed that these were top-line players when they gave them those contract extensions. And we've seen it in spurts. In the month of December, Robert Thomas had it. Pavel Buchnevich had it last season. Jordan Kyrou's been playing that way for the last couple of months. But do those guys scream top players to you?
Well, I mean, let me just say, they're top-line players. And they're players that obviously take on a lot of the offensive load. But and let's look where their salaries at. Let's start to look at where the superstars are at. They're right where they should be, based on what their productivity is. But again, they're good players. They are good players, and I'm not gonna diminish their capabilities. They're not superstars. They can move the needle in little ways, but they're not taking hold of the game and saying, "Let's go here." They don't have those abilities. And so it's not, you want good players, and everybody does want good players. Back to what I was saying, you draft good players, you have good prospects, The St. Louis Blues have a lot of them. But I don't see a superstar in the pipeline. I don't even see anybody that might go, if this all went right, could he be a superstar? And Thomas and Kyrou and those guys, they're not superstars. They're top players. They at times show star ability. And to me, when you look at what they're being paid, it's commensurate with what they're producing, but it's not at the superstar level.
So, Craig, with those prospects that you mentioned, for people that may have missed it, and Craig's got the list up on TSN, Snuggerud was 9th, Dalibor Dvorsky was 21st, Theo Lindstein was number 24 on that list. So you just said that you don't view them as superstars. How do you measure those players' impact on an NHL team?
Well, Jimmy Snuggerud to me is he's one of the very best players in college hockey. He's been phenomenal. He's a goal scorer, and you watch how he can impact a game with goal scoring. I just talked about the St. Louis Blues being better offensively. You know how you move up from the mushy middle up higher is by getting better talent in the goal scorer there. Well, Jimmy Snuggerud delivers that. Dalibor Dvorsky to me is just such a strong two-way player. I don't think he's a first-line center. I think that he's a really good second-line center. He's going to kill penalties. He's going to play on the power play. He's going to give you some points, and that might be 55 points, but that's not superstar. And Theo Lindstein is just to me a superb two-way defenseman. You need good players. So I don't want to diminish the players that like Thomas or Kyrou or any of these players. They're good players. But there is a distinction between superstar status and that next tier of player. And the St. Louis Blues are in that next tier of player. Having more of those players is going to help you have more success. Will it help you ultimately achieve what you're trying to achieve, which is to be a Stanley Cup contender and put yourself in position to win? Like I said, it becomes very difficult, or a lot more difficult, without superstars.
Craig, do you believe that there's a star or superstar quality player available in this year's draft?
Do I think there is? I think, somebody that moves the needle? Yeah, I think Matt Schaefer moves the needle. I think he really does. He reminds me so much of Drew Doughty. I mean, he's a defenseman playing in Erie. He broke his collarbone at the World Junior Championships. But I think somebody that moves the needle, Drew Doughty was a phenomenal player. It's interesting, the next group. And, I compare an Anton Frondel. And now understand, I'm saying comparable type of player. Like, if they could turn out to be these players, I mean, it's found money. So Frondel to me reminds me of Barkov. Martone reminds me of the Tkachuk brothers. Michael Misa reminds me a lot of Clayton Keller, but he might be better than that. He might be a lot better than that. But there's no, what I would call Mackin and Celebrini in this draft. There just isn't. Next year's draft, Gavin McKenna, that's a superstar. If he was in this year's draft, he'd go first overall. There's no question about it. But this year's draft, Matthew Schaefer, I want him on my team. He's like Drew Doughty. And, you get other good players around those guys that can significantly impact the game. You're going to find a way to have success.
All right, Craig, last question that I've got for you, and this has all been really excellent stuff. Craig Button joining us here on 101 ESPN via the Callier and Thompson hotline. If you want to see his full prospects list, the top 50, it's up right now. You can follow him on Twitter to find that link, at Craig J. Button. Final question that I've got for you. There's been some buzz over the last 48 hours or so that Brayden Schenn could become available via the trade market this deadline. Now, there's a lot of caveats there that we don't have to get into, but I'm curious if the Blues were to make him available, and Toronto would be one of the teams that makes a lot of sense for him, given their needs and given his history with Craig Berube. What do you think his value is, potentially, on the trade market?
Yeah, well, so let me go back. I think there would be value for let's just stay right with Toronto, and let's stay with the familiarity of Craig Berube. Okay, so there'd be real value for the Toronto Maple Leafs to be able to add a player like Brayden Schenn, in my view. And when you consider that the cap's going up, so now you can absorb a little bit more in terms of, because you're certainly in the cap, and the cap number's going up, so you can say, now obviously Brayden Schenn has a say on all this. But when you start to look at this level of player, I mean, you're always trying to get what I would call a real top-notch prospect. And I think that for the St. Louis Blues, it's not so much about not trying to get a prospect or a draft pick. It's about trying to target an area of your team. I think the Blues are really well stocked in the prospect cupboard. I think they have a lot of different types of players that are going to play and be good, solid players, and even better than good, solid players. But what are you going to try to extrapolate from? You're not going to get a roster player. So now you got to go to the prospect pool. So who is that? I don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs should be interested in trading Easton Cowan, and I don't think they should. But, who's that next? Where's that next tier of player in the prospect pool where they could identify an area that could really help their team? Is it a bigger defender? Ben Danford got drafted in the first round last year by the Leafs. He's a right shot defender. He's competitive, hard. He's going to be a second pair at best, in my view. But maybe that's a guy you go and you try to get a prospect for at this point in Brayden Schenn's career. But I think there's an opportunity for the Toronto Maple Leafs with Brayden Schenn to really solidify their team, and for the St. Louis Blues to look at an area where you can say, hey, this guy can help us. But Toronto's not the only team here that would be interested in Brayden Schenn, and let's make that very clear.
Craig, it's always great to be able to catch up with you, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today. We appreciate the time as always. We'll be rooting on the Chiefs together. Appreciate the time. We'll talk with you again soon.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Thanks, Craig.
That's Craig Button. Appreciate his time as always. Former NHL executive, now with TSN. Does fantastic work for him. One of my favorite things about Craig Button is that he doesn't pull punches.
Yeah.
He will tell you how he sees it, and he puts it all out there, and you can either take it or leave it. But he's going to tell you exactly what he thinks about things. I respect the candor, and he said what I think a lot of us have been thinking. The Blues have a lot of good prospects in their system right now. They're one of the top systems, depending on how you want to rank them. They've got Jimmy Snugger 9th on this list of Craig Button's top 50 prospects. He said not a superstar. Good player, really nice player, not a superstar.
Yep.
Dvorsky, same thing. Really nice second-line center, not a superstar. Lindsay, same thing. And that's what it feels like the airplane has been made here out of just really solid players. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me so much of the Cardinals' problems for a decade. They have a lot of really good players, and they produce. I think it's been overstated how bad the Cardinal system has been over the last decade. They produce good pieces. Brendan Nonneman's a really good baseball player. Mason Wynn, really good baseball player. Even Lars Newport can't stay healthy, but a good player nonetheless. These are success stories for the development system. They don't produce superstars.
Yeah.
And the Blues haven't produced a superstar in a really long time. The closest thing they've come to that is probably Vladimir Tarasenko. And winning without those guys is incredibly difficult.
Well, and that's I would imagine the Blues' hope is Snuggerud can be a Vladimir Tarasenko to get close to it, or Dvorsky can be a Ryan O'Reilly. But you know what those teams also had? An Alex Pietrangelo, who was at least the closest thing to a superstar. That's why, in my opinion, you got to get, and this is why I asked him that, you got to get a top 5 pick this year. If you want a superstar, and I don't think you're going to get it via free agency. You're not going to find it via trade. I think you're going to have to get it in a draft. And there's always risk with that because sometimes those guys don't pan out to be the superstars that you thought they were, but you're in a position if things continue to go south. And look, let's be honest, if you're going to go to a trade deadline and trade away a Brayden Schenn or move some of the other roster players off of your team, that might be the direction you're headed, but you hope that that's a quick offset if you can navigate those rough waters via trade deadline and then, of course, the offseason.
I think your best hope to be able to get one of these guys is either a star that becomes frustrated with his current situation, or the team decides because of whatever happens this year in the postseason, hey, we got to go in a new direction, right? That's one off-ramp for you. Another is just this offseason, you go to the free agency market and you say, you know what? We can't keep living this way. We've got to go plunge into the deep end, and we're going to go sign Mikko Rantanen, or we're going to go sign Mitch Marner.
The hard part is you got to hope that player wants to come to St. Louis.
Totally. It's incredibly difficult, dude. Like, you have to do the thing that is incredibly rare. But last year, Nashville did it.
Yeah.
They got Steven Stamkos. It's failed miserably, but they did the thing that we're talking about the Blues potentially doing. You just have to do it better. You have to go get that guy, and then it has to work. So none of this is easy, man. Being a GM is a really freaking difficult job, but the Blues have got a lot of the stuff you need to be a good team. They're just missing the hardest thing to find.
And the good news, though, is I think they're president of hockey operations, and why some people might still be optimistic is Doug Armstrong's found ways to be aggressive in the past. This is going to be a step outside of his comfort zone, though, because no longer do you get those steals in highway robberies and the trades like you did with O'Reilly. Other teams are on alert when Doug Armstrong calls.
What's the closest comparison for trading Brayden Schenn? You have the Rolodex of Blues moves of the last 25 years.
For the Blues?
Whether it's the Blues under Armstrong making a move like that, I guess the closest thing would be probably Oshie. It's different, of course, because Oshie was a young player, and they traded for basically the equivalent of Brayden Schenn. This would be almost like trading Matthew Nyes for Schenn in reverse from the Blues.
Damn,
but
I don't know if I could come up with one, to be honest. Not somebody who is a little bit on the older side, but also with 3 years left on his contract. I mean, I don't remember what Pronger had on his contract.
I was about to say, would it be the Pronger deal?
I don't remember. I think he only had like 1 year on his contract left, though, because they traded him to Edmonton, and then he was a free agent and signed in
I'm
Anaheim.
talking about when they acquired Pronger, though.
Oh, well, no, when they acquired Pronger, he was a first-round or second-round pick, and they traded Shanahan, who was still a young player.
Yeah, but Shanny was a little older, right? No?
I don't remember. I thought he was a little bit younger. We're both Googling it to find out. He was 23.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
No, he's 26. They acquired Shanny when he was 23. They
okay, yeah, they got it. Yeah,
but that's still young.
He's still young.
Honestly, I don't know that there's a comparison.
I think the closest thing would probably be Chris Pronger, but again, like he only had 1 year left on his deal because he would have been 32 when they traded him away, and that was after the lockout. But I only think there was 1 year on that contract left, and of course that was a scenario where they had to get rid of money because there was a potential sale of the team.
Yeah, it's just it's a difficult spot to be in. There's other teams that have made moves like this, but the Blues are almost never in this kind of a situation.
And this one wasn't a trade for the Blues, but when they walked away from David Backes, it's kind of the equivalent of it. But again, you weren't trading Backes, you were walking away, and he got you.
They've done that in free agency. O'Reilly, Petro, Backes, like they've walked away from guys or young players that they either traded because they weren't going to be able to resign or traded to get more established veterans. They've made all of those kinds of moves. Hell, they've gone out and did what they did last year with the offer sheets. Every aggressive move you can make, the Blues have basically made under Doug Armstrong. Right. The two things really they haven't done. One, plunge into the deep end of the free agency market. They have not done that. And two, trade away a proven star who was a leader on the team with multiple years left on their contracts. Those are the two things they really have not done.
Yeah, I think the deepest they've ever been in free agency was that Paul Stastny year. And Paul Stastny was the top-level free agent, but that shows you how kind of quiet that free agency period was, and they got him. And a lot of that was because of the ties to St. Louis.
Yeah.
So this is uncharted waters for the Blues, and it's why I think we're seeing Schenn's name in the trade rumors, Kairu's name in the trade rumors, Buchnevich's name in the trade rumors, because the Blues realize they can't keep doing this.
He's Alex, it's T-Bone, I'm BK. If you missed any of our conversation with Craig Button, it's well worth your time. It's over on the podcast page after the show today, 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app. The Junk Show is coming up next.
from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
I need to apologize to you for a number of different things, but especially for making fun of you about your bed bug stuff.
Okay, why? You got bed bugs, man?
Anytime that we go on a trip, the three of us together, normally we do this in Alton, but the three of us, we go to an Airbnb. The first thing that Alex Ferrario does is this full inspection. It takes like 5 minutes, and he goes thoroughly inspecting the bed to make sure there are no bed bugs, right?
Shout out to my dad. Thanks, man. No bed bugs. I'm a zero bed bugs in my life.
Thanks, Dad.
Thanks, Dad.
I've never had bed bugs either. I've never checked for them, but Alex made sure whenever we're at an Airbnb, I'm safe. I appreciate that about you.
Never
the
check
reason
your bed.
why 2 tourists just died in Sri Lanka after a hostel fumigated was fumigated for bed bugs. Now, here's the pivot here, though. They didn't die from the bed bugs. The fumigation,
were they in there?
The pesticides actually ended up being the thing that killed these people from trying to get rid of bed bugs.
So was it with the residual fumigation,
suppose, yeah.
or was it currently being fumigated and they said, let's stay here?
They saw the tent over it and they were, I'm just here.
That fumigation's no joke, man.
This hostel was fumigated to treat bed bugs, and then these people both got sick, and then it ended up being something that
You know what I bet it was?
Obviously, so feel for them.
I bet it got on the sheets or the covers, and they weren't properly cleaned, and that's probably where the fumigation. That's why I tell people all the time, listen up, Alex Ferrario is here to help you. Daddy Alex is here to take care of you.
Oh, gosh.
Never call yourself that again.
Daddy Alex, ladies and gentlemen, is here to take care of you. Never sleep with a comforter in a hotel. That thing never gets cleaned.
Is that true?
Yeah, never. Never gets cleaned. And the people, my buddy, the one time we went to Vegas, we got back to the room, hadn't even checked into our room. He goes up and he just pulls the sheets and the comforter over him. I panicked. I'm like, get that off! It's disgusting. The thing is never cleaned.
I use it every time that I go.
Oh, my God. It's
wonderful.
amazing
I
that
really
you have
enjoy
never had bed
sleeping
bugs.
in a hotel bed. It's the greatest thing. I really enjoy it.
I don't even think twice about it. I've never thought about it until I met Ferrario.
Because I've made Katie so anal about this when we go stay at hotels. She brings a sleeping bag and sleeps in the sleeping bag in the bed.
That's ridiculous.
Hey, man.
You have done that. That's on you. You should feel bad about yourself for that,
No,
Alex.
man. She doesn't want to get bed bugs, and I don't blame her.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. We've got Jordan Deacon back in the studio for
Daddy
us
Alex.
today, taking care of things as we are out of the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. You call yourself that one more time, I'm kicking you out of the studio.
Daddy Alex, I have to go pee.
Alex is on vacation mode. He's got one more hour before he's out for a week. Coming up next, baseball seems to think that the Dodgers are good for the sport. I just don't understand how they could possibly actually believe that. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We got Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us today. We're broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. There was a piece that came out yesterday over on The Athletic, and Evan Drellick wrote this, and Drellick is the bringer of doom. And when he writes something over on The Athletic, seems like a great dude. He just, every time he writes a piece, I'm like, oh, God, what's baseball doing?
Like the life is sucked out of Evan Drellich over these last few years, where he's had to sit in CBA meetings nonstop, and then the television deal lawsuits.
He reported on the Astros controversy that took place there, where they were a bunch of cheaters banging on the trash cans.
Evan's got to be like, can somebody give me positive news to break?
He was the #1 guy on the lockout a few years ago, and basically everything that Rob Manfred says, Drellick is the one that he says it to. So,
well, he's set up to fail.
Yeah, exactly. So yesterday, Rob Manfred was asked, I think the owners' meetings are taking place right now, so that's why all this news is coming out with Manfred talking. He was asked about the LA Dodgers and if he thinks that the Dodgers are a problem for Major League Baseball, given how much they're spending right now. Here's Rob Manfred's response. Quote, no. Oh, God, Manfred, you already started off poorly.
Come on, Rob.
I don't agree with that. The Dodgers are a really well-run, successful organization. Everything they do and have done is consistent with our rules. They're trying to give their fans the best possible product. Those are all positives. I recognize, however, and my email certainly reflects it, there are fans in other markets who are concerned about their team's ability to compete, and we have always had to be concerned about our fans, and when they're concerned about something, but pinning it on the Dodgers, not in that camp, end quote. Okay.
T-Bone's already angry. Let's let him cook.
Let's start here.
Manfred's just an idiot.
Rob Manfred's job is to work for the owners. The owners are above Manfred in this workplace flowchart. Let's make that very clear. He goes to them, asks them what they want, and then he goes and does it. He's the attack dog, basically. So keep that in mind when he says something like this. I've got a tinfoil theory on this. I don't think I've ever shared this before, on the radio or to you guys personally.
Oh, boy.
Be careful with this one.
What does baseball want? What do baseball owners want more than anything in the world?
Money.
A cap.
A cap.
Oh.
What is the best way to get pressure on players to go towards a salary cap? What's the best way to do that?
I don't think that's a tinfoil at all. I think that's exactly what's taking place.
It's for one team to go so extraordinarily high on their luxury tax and to just not care about it and to accumulate stars in a way that makes every other team's fan base look at it and say, this isn't fair and it's actually ruining my enjoyment of the sport, right? That is the only way you can truly apply pressure on players to agree to this cap.
Well, and the trickle-down effect to that is the players start to fight amongst themselves because players are getting screwed over because they're not getting signed. Nobody else wants to get in on free agency.
They're getting squeezed. Everybody underneath that true top tier of free agent is getting squeezed now, all the way to, like, Alex Bregman potentially having to take a short-term contract, right? Like Pete Alonso, who hit 40 home runs and was one of the stars of the Mets even before they got good again. He's now having to accept a short-term deal in New York, a team that does not care about the luxury tax threshold. The reason why I bring this up, it's a tinfoil theory. I don't know how much I actually believe it, but I kind of believe it. I think there might be something here, and it's that big C word, right? The collusion. I don't know how much it's actually said versus just kind of agreed upon that this would be good for the sport. I think it's entirely possible that the Dodgers are almost constructed in order to break the current system of Major League Baseball because it's the only thing that'll do it. And it's taking place at the exact right time where they can really see, okay, over the next few years, if the Dodgers are as good as people think that they are, and I certainly am in that camp of thinking they are extraordinary, if they go out there and not just sign these stars and not just have success in the regular season, but then accumulate rings on top of that, plural, multiple, over the next few years, that's when you start to see a true clamoring among fans. Because right now you can say, guys, look, there's nobody that repeats in Major League Baseball. It's the hardest sport. The parity is there. Sure, that exists right now. What if it doesn't? What changes among the current vibe among fans, media, owners, players, everybody alike if the Dodgers have a three-peat? If the Dodgers do in baseball what is currently taking place in the NFL with the Chiefs, that's when things really start to change. So my tinfoil theory, the LA Dodgers are a contract of Major League Baseball, and Rob Manfred actually wants this to happen because the owners really want a cap, and this is the only way they think they can get it.
Yeah, they're a licensed hitman right now, and they're trying to take down the entire system for the owner side of things. And I think you're spot on. I think that's a real conspiracy theory that's taking place right now. But I think it's important to urge people that this isn't going to end with, oh, well, the Dodgers keep doing this. You know what? Let's happily agree on a salary cap so that we can move past it. This is going to get nasty. And, I mean, I don't remember, is the CBA up after this year or 2 years from now?
2 years, yeah.
26.
I smell a lockout.
Me too.
Because when you go down this path, it gets real nasty first because the players are going to get pissed off and then the owners are going to get pissed off because of all of this, and you're going back and forth. This is going to lead into a lockout, but I hope happier days are beyond that. And that's kind of what the NHL did in that 04-05 lockout. They had that full year of it, and it was like, okay, look, we're all losing money. We need to get back to this. Now, they didn't institute a salary cap. It was already in place at that point, if I'm not mistaken. But you got to have those ugly times, and we've already seen some of the ugly times from COVID. That's going to be the trickle-down effect, especially if the Dodgers go off into God mode over these next couple of years.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong on this tinfoil, because why else do we see reports that come out that say, hey, owners are preparing for a potential fight for a cap, and then Manfred comes out and is like, yeah, the Dodgers not a problem. Okay, well, Rob, let's think about this. Why are we talking about a cap? It's because of the Dodgers. And I kind of agree with what you're saying, Alex. Like, baseball may just need to go through 2026 when they get to the CBA and say, we might need to miss games. We got to figure this out because this is a major problem. And I think the media, and like, I hate to be the guy that rips on reporters because I think they do a great job. And I respect the hell out of what reporters are doing. Ken Rosenthal, guys like that, especially at the national media. I think Ken's got it all wrong. I think Stark's got it all wrong. Like, they keep saying, oh, look at the parity. Look at the parity. How about the hope? Right? Where's the hope in an offseason for some of these teams? And I'm not even just talking about the Cardinals. Like, look, Pittsburgh Pirates. We all know Skeens ain't going to be there in 5 years. Paul Skeens is the kind of talent that should never leave Pittsburgh after he's been drafted.
He should be the Patrick Mahomes of Pittsburgh or the Josh Allen of Pittsburgh.
Or
Josh Allen,
Kumpo of the Pittsburgh.
Sure, Josh Allen plays for Buffalo. Patrick Mahomes plays in Kansas City. Peyton Manning spent the majority of his career, in the entirety of his career, in Indianapolis and in Denver. These are not the biggest markets in America. Like, when was the last time New York had a marquee quarterback not named Eli Manning?
Yeah, well, Shohei Ohtani should have never left the Angels.
Exactly. He's with the Dodgers, though. But
the Angels were the team that brought him here.
I see what I misinterpreted what she said. I got you. You're right.
You know what happened to the last interpreter that was for Shohei, right?
Yeah, can we be honest, though? Thank goodness Ohtani's not the Angels.
Fine, but with a salary cap, maybe the team's a little bit more competitive.
But, like, in like Rosenthal's piece today was like, well, you see the Brewers, they have a guy on a long-term contract. Hey, look, Jose Ramirez is with the Guardians. No, Jose Ramirez is with the Guardians on a team-friendly contract, right? Yep. He didn't get market value. The Guardians were able to convince him before he hit free agency. If he wanted to go to free agency, he's gone.
The rarity is Bobby Witt Jr. The rarity is Bobby Witt Jr. agreeing to a market value deal with a team like 100%. Kansas City and then staying with them the entirety of his career, which we'll see. He has not gotten to the real money yet, right? So we'll see if he ends up actually doing that. From the 573, the text line, by the way, 314-399-9646. That's the Air Comfort Service text line. Said, guys, it's not just the salary. It's also the TV deals, money, blackouts. It's all of it. Totally. And this is where baseball runs into a lot of problems. It is not like football, where the TV deals are all centralized. It is national TV contracts for everybody. Nobody has a local TV deal. Now, there's other revenues that are local, sure, but most of the money is centralized, and then they spread it out amongst their teams. And everybody agrees what is and is not football-related revenues. That's what's tough for baseball. The books are not open. And even when the books do get opened, if they were to, in this scenario where you have a cap, they're not going to agree what is and isn't baseball-related revenue. Because right now, like Ballpark Village, is that baseball-related revenue? It kind of depends who you ask. If you ask the Players Association, the answer is yes, and they would point to the fact that most of the revenues for Ballpark Village takes place while the baseball season is on. The owners would say, yeah, but it's not baseball-related. Baseball-related is what happens at Busch Stadium. Well, why was Ballpark Village constructed across the street from Busch Stadium?
And has seats that count towards attendance.
And it goes round and round and round we go. So you don't even get to the point of how do we construct the cap. You get to the what is baseball-related revenue. And this is where things get really difficult because everything is localized in baseball. It's just a completely different economy. It's a different revenue stream than any other sport, really. So I don't know how this gets fixed or how long it takes to get fixed, but I think baseball needs this. And I think it could actually be good for players. It won't be good for Shohei Ohtani. It won't be good for whoever the next version of Albert Pujols is. It won't be good for the next Juan Soto or anything like that. But for like 90% of the league, I think a cap ends up being a positive thing. And I think we're seeing that in the NHL. We've seen it over the years in the NFL. Unfortunately, I don't know how we get there. And that's where things get really tough. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll get to our Super Bowl look ahead. We'll give you our final thoughts leading into Sunday's game between the Eagles and the Chiefs. I just saw on Get Up earlier today, Alex. Mm-hmm. Every single person on the panel picks the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. It's amazing. It happens every year.
That'll go well.
Yeah, I was going to say,
every single year we get to this point in the cycle, and it's like, oh, man, it's Patrick Mahomes versus the better team. It was that way with the 49ers twice. The last time the Eagles played them, it was the same thing. Every time, it's the exact same story. All right, coming up next, we talked about this a lot today. Brayden Schenn's name is coming up on all of these trade lists, and it's really started to gain some traction over the last 48 hours. What is the value of trading Brayden Schenn? What could the Blues get in return? And is this the right time to actually think about doing it? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Broadcasting live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios. This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alongside Alex and Tebow going? I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. All right, so we're talking about the Brayden Schenn stuff that's come up over the last couple of days, right? If you've been living under a rock, you haven't heard anything about this. All the trade charts that are out there. T-Bone asked this question. Actually, no, Alex asked this question, I think, last week on one of our segments. He said, hey, like, believe it or not, there will be a prominent member of the Blues core that is featured. That was you on these trade lists over the next few weeks prior to the NHL trade deadline. And I was like, I don't know, that feels a little over the top to me. Well, it's happening. There was a new one put out today by Sportsnet, and it had basically every prominent member of the Blues,
everybody
not
but
Robert Thomas, on it. And Brayden Schenn's the one that is getting the most traction. And I think a lot of this is coming from the Toronto side of things, like Elliot Friedman, Darren Dreger, both mentioned this on their recent podcasts. It seems like a lot of people are connecting, hey, Toronto has a coach in Craig Berube that has ties to St. Louis. Brayden Schenn was a really good player for them. They need somebody that plays the way that Brayden Schenn does, and they're lacking a number 2 center. Ipso facto, Brayden Schenn to the Toronto Maple Leafs. My question to you, Alex, what's the value of this? Because I'm kind of having a hard time wrapping my head around it. Because on one hand, I get it. If the Blues have to retain salary, if you retain $3 million for 3 years, you typically get a first-round pick. Regardless of if the player is any good or not. Just even if the Blues had like a third party involved with this and they were the one that was retaining the salary, they would get a first-round pick because that's what they value it at. And then you've got the player involved, which Brayden Schenn is good, but he's got 3 years left on his deal, and he's 33 years old. What is the value of trading Brayden Schenn for the other team? If you're acquiring Brayden Schenn, how much value does he have right now?
The value has to be on how much his cap hit is. To me, if you're taking on $6.5 million, I don't think there's much value. If you're eating some of it, I think there's a lot of value. And so you're stuck in that in between because I'm looking at teams, if Brayden Schenn is getting traded and agreeing to be traded, you're going to a team that's got a legit shot at winning a Stanley Cup, which is why the Toronto Maple Leafs are in this conversation. And if I'm the Toronto Maple Leafs, I've tried it all. I've tried the Marner, Matthews, William Nylander, John Tavares experience. I've tried the bringing in Mark Giordano, the 40-year-old defenseman who could put us over the top. I've tried it all. And guess what? It's all failed. I got to get over the hump. I brought in Craig Berube. That's an aggressive move to say we need to win now. I kept William Nylander. I'm going to keep Mitch Marner. I need to win now. So if there is a team out there that says, look, we got to get over the hump, I think the value of a Brayden Schenn is probably somewhere between a first and a second round pick if I'm getting him for cheap because you're getting a 32-year-old.
So you're talking about the equivalent of a first-round pick for the player and a first-round pick for the salary that's being retained. So the value of Schenn, and it doesn't have to be literally 2 first-round picks, but the value of him in that scenario of $3.5 million for the next 3 years, Brayden Schenn, is effectively 2 first-round picks. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just making sure that I understand.
Yeah, let me correct myself then. I think the value for Brayden Schenn, the player, is probably a second-round draft pick.
Okay.
I think the value of eating salary is a first-round draft pick.
I agree.
And the reason I say that is because look at Claude Giroux. Claude Giroux was 34 years old when the Philadelphia Flyers traded him to the Florida Panthers to try, mind you, the Panthers were trying to win the Stanley Cup that year. And the year that he was traded, 18 goals, 42 points, it was a -12. Now, he was a free agent at the end of the year, but he was 34 years old. So, ipso facto, 32-year-old Brayden Schenn with 3 more years, they acquired a 34-year-old that, there was no commitment, but Florida had mentioned they'd be interested in bringing him back if they had success. They didn't. They moved on from him. He was traded for Owen Tippett, who was a former first-round draft pick, a third-round draft pick, and a conditional first-round draft pick that became a second-round draft pick. And that's for a UFA.
Tippett, a second, and a third, basically.
Yeah.
First, second, third.
And that's for a UFA. Now, if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I have to imagine that the reason this is coming up is because Craig Berube's like, this guy can help us win a Stanley Cup championship. You look at that and you say, man, I know Brayden Schenn is older. I know Brayden Schenn hasn't performed well, but we need to win. And we need to win sooner rather than later because the longer you wait, the more difficult it becomes. So, I don't think the Matthew Nyes thing is outlandish. We're making it out to be like Matthew Nyes was a 3rd overall draft pick. He was drafted in the 2nd round. He's played well because he's playing on the top line with Austin Matthews. He's a net front presence player. He's a 20-goal scorer. Does he help me win the Stanley Cup if I'm Toronto? No. I had him last 2 years, and I missed the playoffs 2 years. He's a younger player you don't want to move on from, but but I got to lock up Mitch Marner. So I think if you're talking Brayden Schenn for a team that believes they can win a cup, and I don't think there's many of them that are looking at Brayden Schenn saying he puts us over the top. Yeah, I think it's a first or a second round, the equivalent of those two.
Yeah. I guess it's just one of those things where I'm so close to what we've seen with Schenn, and I really like Brayden Schenn, personally and professionally. I think he's a good hockey player, and on the personal side of things, the dude's an unbelievable leader, and he's been nothing but great inside of the community. So, like, losing Brayden Schenn off of the Blues is not something that I want to see happen, but business is business, and so we got to talk about this, right? Schenn has not been good the last couple of years. Now, I think a lot of that is due to injuries. Those don't just go away, though. A 33-year-old with injury history in his recent past is something that you have to consider if you're a team that's taking him on. And he's really kind of a 20-goal scorer at this point in his career, probably a 45 to 50-point producer, I think is what you expect if you're a team taking him on. And I don't know how long that continues, but at least for the next couple of years, I would think that's probably the range that you're expecting him to be. So at $3.5 million, that's better than what I would have to pay for that same player on the market. So I'm getting a steal there. But, man, I think where this gets difficult for me is the type of haul that I'm having to give in return for Brayden Schenn if I'm one of these teams. It just feels like a lot, man. And maybe I'm overvaluing those picks, prospects, players, whatever it might be. I also think this is a really difficult trade to square, specifically with Toronto. Matthew Nyes is the guy that we've brought up. But if I'm Toronto, like, can I win a cup without Matthew Nyes? Because I kind of
couldn't get past the first round with Matthew Nyes, though.
Totally. But if I'm replacing Matthew Nyes with Brayden Schenn, is that really a forward move or is that a lateral move? Well, and that's for the right now. Yeah. And then you think about for the future, and the cap really doesn't change much for us because Matthew Nyes is going to get probably some kind of a bridge contract around $4 million, let's say. That's basically what you're paying to Brayden Schenn in this scenario. So you're getting older. You're not getting a lot cheaper. I'm not sure I'm actually getting that much better. So I don't think it makes sense for them to trade a Nyes in this specific deal. And then for the Blues, okay, if I'm not getting Nyes, what am I getting from the Maple Leafs that makes this make sense? So while they make sense to want Brayden Schenn, I don't know that there's a deal to be had.
And here's the thing. I don't think there's a lot of teams that make sense for Brayden Schenn. That's why Toronto keeps coming up. Like, Florida's not going to make that move. Florida's got plenty of Brayden Schenns. Tampa's going to go get more skill for their team. Washington, if I'm Washington, I'm not touching this team right now. Carolina, they don't really need that. They have those players. Plus, they've got Rantanen. And then look at the Western Conference. The Western Conference is probably in a position where they're like, yeah, we're good. I really think it comes down to a team that lacks the element that Brayden Schenn brings that needs it to their roster. And I'm not saying this is straight up. Brayden Schenn, 50% salary retention for Matthew Nyes. I think there's probably more that will go into this.
I feel like this has to be a 3-team deal. And that gets really complicated. I understand that. But the reason why I mentioned that is, Alex, the Buffalo Sabres are talking about Dylan
Cousins.
And just throwing his name out there. It could be somebody else, right? But a team like that has a young player that's potentially getting to a bridge deal, and they're not sure if they're going to re-sign him long-term or whatever. One of those players comes to the Blues, Schenn goes to Toronto, and then the draft picks go to the team that's about to tank. That's the kind of deal to me that would make sense in this scenario. I don't know who those players would be or who that team would be that's a third party, but I think that's the only way you could make something like this happen. Because the Blues don't need first-round picks anymore.
No, that's the thing, and they're not
done
going
with
for
the talent accumulation part. Now they need guys that can contribute right now to the NHL roster.
And that's why I do think it's going to be a roster player. That's why when Darren Dreger said it's going to have to be a mammoth return, we might think that's crazy. You're not getting a mammoth return, and you're probably right. Maybe teams look at that and say, nope, that's too much. I'm not going to pay for it for Brayden Schenn. What else is out there that I can get for cheaper? And that's typically how those trade deadlines go. But I think if you're the Blues, you realize what BK just said. I don't need second-round draft picks anymore. I don't need your best prospect that just was drafted 2 years ago. I need something that helps me now.
And I think, you asked the question, like, you're having a tough time figuring out, like, how Toronto's getting to this point of giving that up for Brayden Schenn. And I think it just comes down to, like, we have the conversation a lot about the locker room. Does it matter? I say no, and I think the Blues are a perfect example of this now. And Alex will say yes, and BK says it matters some. I think what you're seeing where that disconnect could be right now from where we're thinking of this is, hey, the NHL still clearly values guys that have a Stanley Cup championship. Mm-hmm. And that's what Toronto's looking at right now. And, and to your question of like, well, Matthew Nyes, well, you got knocked out in the first round with him last year. And, hey, he's on the top line with Alston Matthews. That's why he's scoring. I think that's where we're seeing this disconnect is Toronto's looking at it saying, yeah, he's with Austin Matthews. Of course he's putting up numbers. Well, the Blues might be looking at it saying, no, we think that guy's legit. We think he can work even with us. And they're looking at it saying, we need championship caliber. And I kind of agree with you, BK. I feel like it'd be a major overpay by the Toronto Maple Leafs. But they may look at Brayden Schenn and say, hey, that championship stuff matters. We know Craig Berube believes in that stuff. And that might be how Toronto gets to a spot where they say, yeah, let's give up a Matthew Nyes, a first-round pick, and go and make this kind of a move.
They've been bounced out of the playoffs in the first round 6 of their last 7 seasons. And, I mean, you want to talk about a team that nobody else is desperate like Toronto. Carolina's not desperate. Tampa's not desperate. Washington's not desperate. New Jersey's...
there's urgency within the market.
Yeah.
That's where the desperation comes from, is because it's like the Cardinals. If they got knocked out of the first round 6 out of the last 7 years, oh, wait.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
That hit
I
too
know
close
this
to home.
situation.
Here's the other thing, too, for Toronto. Like, Marner has got 71 points. He's the 4th best player in the National Hockey League right now in terms of points percentage. If you're them, I know Matthew Nyes is a tough pill to swallow because he's 23, but that's a 20-goal scorer. Mitch Marner's 27 years old, and he's 70-plus points.
In this scenario, you're not actually getting any benefit of cap relief.
No, not now, but next season when
really
Mitch Marner's getting – well,
Nyes is probably going to get a little bit of a bump in pay. He's at like $750 right now, but I bet you he gets some kind of a bridge deal, which gets him up to 3 or so, which is where Schenn's at.
But what took place last offseason with offer sheets? A team could go in there and say, hey, I'm going to give him $6 million because the cap's going up.
Fair.
And then they're like, well, now what do? We got bounced in the first round again because we didn't want to pay the price.
And somebody ties up their money with Matthew Nyes on an offer
and now
sheet,
we're screwed.
Suddenly we've got to decide between Nyes and Marner.
And you don't think there's teams looking around the National Hockey League right now going, look what Doug just did. Let's see if we can pull this one off.
That is the best point you've made so far today.
I made a pretty damn good one at 11:15.
No, you made a pretty damn good one at like 9:15. Nobody got to hear it. But for me,
well, 9:15 I was ready to beat the ish out of you, but 11:15 I was like, hey, we could do this in calm, civilized manner.
In 15 minutes, we're going to get into our BK and Ferrario Rewind, putting a bow on everything that we've talked about so far today. But next, time for our Super Bowl look ahead. What are the biggest things that we're looking for in this weekend Super Bowl? We'll tell you next here on 101 ESPN.
T-Bone here to tell you about Pick 6 from DraftKings, as Super Bowl 59 is this Sunday, and that means it's your last chance to play NFL Pick 6 this season. You can play for better payouts on Pick 6, and it's super easy to get started. Select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. Like I'm looking at Saquon Barkley, less than 112.5 rush yards. Travis Kelce, more than 62.5 receiving yards. And Mahomes, more than 251.5 passing yards. $10 on that can get you 40+. And DraftKings is even making it sweeter for first-timers, as new Pick 6 customers can play $5 and get $59 in Pick 6 credits. Chiefs Kingdom, win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use my promo code 101WXOS. That's code 101WXOS for new customers to play $5 and get $59 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 18+. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus award is non-drawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Blues lost 2-1 to the Florida Panthers. They're off today and back in action tomorrow, welcoming in the rivals, Chicago Blackhawks. Pregame show right here on 101 ESPN starts at 5, and then puck drop is at 6. Before that Blues game, though, we've got college basketball action for you. Oklahoma versus Tennessee pregame kicks off at 10:30. And then, of course, on Sunday, we've got the Super Bowl coverage starting for you at 1 o'clock. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page at 101ESPN.com or from the free 101 mobile app. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. All right, let's get into our Super Bowl look ahead. We're going to get into the biggest question that'll decide the game. We're going to get into our X Factor, the winner, MVP, maybe give you a couple of prop bets that we like as well. All right, let's start out with Alex, your biggest question that you think will determine the outcome of the game.
Can Jalen Hurts adapt? That's going to be my biggest thing, because I think the game plan is Saquon Barkley be the hero, and the game plan from the Chiefs is put as much pressure on Jalen Hurts as possible. And they can try and put pressure on Patrick Mahomes, but you know what's going to happen. I don't know if Jalen Hurts can see the pressure and adapt to it. So that's my biggest question mark. If Philly's going to be the Super Bowl champion, it's going to be because Jalen Hurts is able to do something that we didn't expect him to.
And mine kind of ties into that. Mine is, can the Eagles win the Super Bowl if Barkley doesn't go off, right? Because the Chiefs haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher in the playoffs since, what was the number?
Since Spagnuolo took over. The last one to do so was Sony Michel as the running back for the 2018 New England Patriots that won in Kansas City.
I remember it was a flash-in-the-pan running back was the name. Yeah. But like that goes to show you right there, okay, so they're really good against the run when they've had Spags as their DC. So is Jalen Hurts going to be able to outplay Mahomes and give the Eagles a chance in this one if Barkley gets stopped? That's the biggest question for me. And maybe it doesn't end up becoming a question. Maybe Barkley just goes off, rushes for 150, boom, Super Bowl MVP, Eagles win it all. If he doesn't, though, I just don't believe in Hurts being able to beat Patrick Mahomes.
My biggest question is the framing of this game right? Are people right in the way that they're framing this game? And the reason why I'm asking that is because I think most of the media is framing this as it's the better team versus the best player. The Eagles have the better, more well-rounded team. They are better at almost every position than the Kansas City Chiefs, other than quarterback, which is obviously the most important position. So it's Patrick Mahomes versus this unbelievable team, right? And if that's right, if the Eagles are that much better overall, and I'm not sure it is, I would say it's not, but if that ends up being correct, the Eagles are going to win this game. But I don't think I agree with that assessment of this game. Man, the Chiefs went 15-1 in the regular season, and they're 17-1 overall this year when their starters play. And I'm supposed to believe that the Eagles are the more well-rounded team? Like, that doesn't just happen. I think that we almost drag the rest of the roster in order to prop up Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes is great. We don't have to do any more work for him to make him look better than he is. Chris Jones is also amazing. Trent McDuffie is a top 5 cornerback in the NFL. Travis Kelce is not what he once was, but he's still a good player. Xavier Worthy has developed into a really nice weapon for them offensively. Dude, Joe Thuney went from guard to tackle and is playing like a borderline Pro Bowler out there, and they have the best center in the NFL right now. The Chiefs aren't devoid of talent. That is a really weird narrative that's begun to spin over the last really few years now. It happened against the 49ers. Guess who won that game? The Chiefs. It happened against the Eagles last time around. Guess who won that game? Chiefs. Oh, and it happened again against the 49ers 2 years ago. Chiefs won that game as well. So I think the framing of the game is just incorrect. But if I'm wrong, the Eagles will win it. So I think that is, to me, the biggest question that will determine the outcome of this game. Are people framing this the correct way? All right, next thing up here, Alex. Who's your X factor in this one?
Mine's Xavier Worthy. A little personal because I have some money on Xavier Worthy, but I think that's the type of player. Travis Kelce is going to be a target for them. Isaiah Pacheco / the running game is going to be a target for them. And I think if people look at the Chiefs, it's going to be some wide receiver that you weren't expecting. Juju Smith-Schuster, DeAndre Hopkins. But I think Xavier Worthy is such a dual threat to where he can score a touchdown through the air or he can score one with his legs. That's the type of player that I think Philadelphia isn't going to be able to find a proper game plan with. He'll be my X factor.
Maybe I'm underselling this player to be an X factor. Mine would be Jalen Carter. Because I wonder if they can get pressure up the middle on Mahomes and really speed him up. And Carter now has been dealing with the flu bug. He's going to play. It's fine. The damn Super Bowl. How much does that flu affect him? I don't think it's going to affect him that much.
No effect.
But if you can get pressure on Mahomes, we've seen, that was the formula for Tampa winning that Super Bowl. Brady was great when they beat Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
The real storyline was Patrick Mahomes had no time.
Same thing against the Bengals. The Bengals in that game in the AFC Championship game, they had a really smart plan up front. They looped their defensive end around. It bothered Mahomes, and then he had no answers for it.
And I think that's the way you beat him. That's why we see why are the Raiders always pesky when they play the Chiefs. It's not because the Raiders have talent. It's because Max Crosby's a freaking beast. And if Jalen Carter can have a huge game and get in the face of Patrick Mahomes, I don't even know if he has to sack him. But if he can just continuously get pressure on him up the middle, I think that's enough to slow down that Chiefs offense.
Don't forget about my boy Jordan Davis.
Davis, another one.
So one thing worth monitoring here, typically what we've seen from the Eagles is that they'll line up their best defensive tackle, Jalen Carter, on the right side of the offensive line. So he would go up against Trey Smith, who is the Chiefs' best guard, and that leaves the Chiefs' replacement guard, Mike Caliendo, going up against Jordan Davis and some of the Milton Williams as well. So that's a spot worth monitoring as well. So my X factor going into this one is actually a guy by the name of Shamari Connor. He's not a household name by any stretch of the imagination. He's the slot corner for the Kansas City Chiefs. He exclusively plays in the slot. The reason why I'm going with him is because the Chiefs have really struggled against two things: one, tight ends, and two, slot receivers. Why? Because Shamari Connor cannot cover. So I'm curious to see what Steve Spagnuolo decides to do there, because Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert lined up a lot in the slot. Devontae Smith in particular, I would make it to where Trey McDuffie, you're following him. If he's outside, you go get him. If he's in the slot, you go get him. Trey McDuffie's a great slot corner. That's what he previously was when they had L'Jarius Sneed. They have not done that in the postseason yet. Is that something they adjust? That's something I'll be monitoring in this game. So Shamari Connor, the typical slot corner for the Chiefs, my X factor in this one.
Because if I'm them, I don't know if I want to take McDuffie off of A.J. Brown.
I want Jalen Watson, their number 2 corner, on A.J. Brown with safety coverage over the top.
Yeah.
So I'm one-on-one with Devontae Smith and Trey McDuffie, my best corner on their second-best receiver, and then I've got a double team basically the entire game.
A.J. Brown's the one that I'd be worried is going to burn me at some point.
He's just so much bigger. Yeah. And Trey McDuffie's a really small guy. Jalen Watson's 6'2" as a corner. All right, your winner and MVP. Who you guys got? Final take here. Your winner and the MVP of this game is who, Alex?
Mine's the winner is the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they win by 3 points, and my MVP is Patrick Mahomes.
I can't believe I'm doing this because I agree with BK's story of, everybody's been saying Eagles have the better roster. I truly believe that. Yet I don't. I think Mahomes finds a way. I don't know how. It's just like the AFC Championship game, right? I felt like the Bills were the better team.
Sure.
I didn't know how, but I knew the Chiefs might win that football game. I feel that way here. I think it's going to be a Chiefs win, and I think it's going to be Mahomes MVP.
Can I change mine real quick? The Chiefs are going to win.
Whatever.
Whoa. Dude, it's been every segment today. No, I'm not picking the Eagles. My MVP,
Sorry, that was bad.
I'm going to switch it to Xavier Worthy because one of the prop bets that I'm starting to really like, Worthy with a rushing touchdown.
Yeah, I'm going with the chalk. I'm going Chiefs win it, and you end up with Patrick Mahomes as the MVP as well.
Damn me for being creative.
I just when the Chiefs win, it's so incredibly difficult for him not to be the MVP. I didn't think he played all that well in the last Super Bowl. He won it.
True.
I think he's going to get it this just by default. I do think that the more interesting side of things is the Chiefs' defense against the Eagles' offense. I don't think it's particularly interesting when the Chiefs' offense is on the field. I think it's going to be really long drives, sustained drives. We know what the Eagles' defense does. We know what the Chiefs' offense does. Neither of them are going to change their stripes a whole lot. I think that'll be a fun battle, but I don't know that there's like an interesting tweak that happens. The Chiefs' defense against the Eagles' offense is awesome. That's the matchup that will be most interesting to watch in this game. 27-23, I think the Chiefs win, cover the spread, and it goes slightly over the point total. We'll get the rewind coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's run it back with the Daily Rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Shaver Door Company.
That 101 ESPN app is free to download. It is easy to use, and it is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. We've got about a minute left here in the show, boys. We're going to get to three different things. The Blues back in action tomorrow against the Chicago Blackhawks. 6 o'clock puck drop. Pre-game with Alex begins at 5. It's the final game before the Four Nations face-off. Alex, anything in particular you're watching for? Okay,
no,
cool.
no, not at all, buddy.
They can win against one of the worst teams in the NHL.
Just don't lose, although part of me's kind of like...
last year they laid the egg against Columbus, and it ended the season.
I will say this, though. 2 points for Chicago makes it that much closer to a top overall pick.
T-Bone, your Illini are going on the road. They've got Minnesota tomorrow night. They've got to win that.
That's like the Blackhawks of the Big Ten.
I don't know, man. Rutgers wasn't a win.
If they lose that game, now we've got real trouble to talk about on Monday. The Missouri Tigers are at home. They're going up against a top 10 opponent because that's what you do in the SEC these days. 4 consecutive games against top 20 ranked opponents. It's Texas A&M coming into Columbia. I think Missouri will win that game, but man, is that a really, really tough opponent. And then they open things up a little bit with Oklahoma and Georgia. I think they win on Saturday. That'll be a huge win for them if they're able to get it. Super Bowl on Sunday. Alex, T-Bone, and myself all have the Kansas City Chiefs.
I do, but man,
I'm rooting like hell for
I'm
the
hoping
Eagles.
that the fly Eagles fly, BK.
I'm sure there will be no conversations on Monday about the referees, and I'm definitely looking forward to that
Pass
one.
interference.
Alex is out next week, a well-deserved vacation for the Four Nations face-off. T-Bone and myself will take you over the next week. So for Jordan Deacon, who did a fantastic job for us today, and Alex, who's out for a week, and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll talk to you guys on Monday. Enjoy your sports weekend here on 101 ESPN.